Chapter 1073. Hearing this, those who came to join in the fun, such as Su Qingyan, quickly shrunk their heads and left after saying that they were going to take a stroll. Not long after, only Master Qingyun, Su Hongyu, Su Hongyan, Su Qingchen, Su Qingze, and Su Qingbai were left in the bustling bamboo forest. Is there anything else? Master Qingyun looked at his grandson and asked calmly. Su Hongyu hesitated and said, "There is something I need to ask father." Master Qingyun raised his snow-white eyebrows. Is it related to Qingfeng and Qingbai's marriage? If it wasn't because of this, Li Er wouldn't have suddenly mentioned Su Qingfeng and Su Qingbai's marriage. Although it was time for the two to get married, there was no need to rush it. Su Hongyu nodded and said, "That's right. These days, many aristocratic families have come to our door and expressed their intention to have a marriage alliance with the Su family." Master Qingyun frowned slightly, and a rare trace of displeasure appeared between his brows. Don't they know that Qingbai and Qingfeng are already engaged? Su Hongyu smiled bitterly and helplessly. The rules and etiquette in this world were just for the common people who didn't know the truth to see. Which aristocratic family with a long history didn't have a bit of shameful things? Even a family like the Su family had a history of betraying its master and killing the emperor. Therefore, as long as they could achieve their goals and obtain the benefits they wanted, why would these people care if the young masters of the Su family were engaged? Moreover, although Hua Tianxiang and Mo Wuyo's status was noble, in the eyes of these people, there was only one word that could describe it: the decline of their family. Most importantly, even if Su Qingbai and Su Qingfeng were married, the most important young master of the Su family, Su Qingchen, was still single. What did Li Er say? Master Qingyun asked calmly. Su Hongyu smiled faintly. Li Er said that the matters of the imperial court don't need to involve marriage. She also doesn't need her brothers and friends to sacrifice their happiness for her. That's why she told father that she wants Qingbai and Qingbai to get married as soon as possible. It can also be considered as cutting off these people's thoughts. Li Er's personality and thoughts are really... The people in this world had long been accustomed to linking the imperial court and marriage together. That was why there was the term marriage alliance. However, Yili seemed to dislike mixing these two things together. It wasn't just because she was a member of the Su family and her friend. Mr. Qingyun nodded approvingly and said, "Although your way of thinking is different from ordinary people, you dare to think, dare to do, and have the courage to bear the consequences. In this aspect, all of you are inferior to Li Er." Su Qingchen smiled and said, "A girl like Li Er, 1 in a million, doesn't appear in this world. But fortunately, there's only one." Su Hongyu glanced at his son and said, "Don't stay out of this. After all, this matter isn't directed at your third brother and fourth brother. Young Master Qingchen, right Chief Minister of the Prince Ding Mansion, what do you plan to do?" There were many people in the Prince Ding Mansion over the age of 30 who were still unmarried, such as Han Mingyue, Han Mingxi, and even Feng Jiao. However, there were very few people in high positions like young Master Qingchen who didn't have the slightest interest in women. In the past, all kinds of things happened in the Prince Ding Mansion, so no one cared. Now that the world was peaceful and Su Qingchen was the right chief minister of the Prince Ding Mansion, he naturally had many people watching him. If Su Qingchen didn't take it seriously, he would say all kinds of unpleasant things in the future. Mr. Hongyu had always been good at preparing for a rainy day, so he naturally had to give his son a warning. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and didn't seem to be anxious at all. Su Qingbai raised his eyebrows and smiled gently. Didn't Big Brother and Miss Shen? Su Qingbai was in West Hill all year round. It could be said that he was the least familiar with Yun Go in the Su family, so he called her Miss Shen. Su Qingchen glanced at him faintly and said, "Fourth brother, you think too much." Su Qingbai blinked, and a strange smile flashed across his eyes. He didn't say anything, but Su Hongyu and Su Hongyan, who were reminded by him, looked at each other. In the end, Su Hongyan said, "Qingbai is right. Qingchen, what do you think of Yun Go? Your mother, second aunt, and your father all like this girl very much. If that's what you mean, second uncle, you think too much." Su Qingchen was still elegant, and the width of his smile didn't change at all. Su Qingbai looked at his big brother for a moment and said with a smile, I heard that Miss Yungo is quite afraid of Big Brother? Young Master Qingchen has always been known for his amiability. Why would anyone be afraid of him? Big Brother, what did you do to the girl? Su Qingbai. Su Qingchen called faintly, but his eyes were full of warning when he looked at Su Qingbai. Su Qingbai shrugged with a smile and raised his hand to show that it was over. Although his big brother's appearance was always extraordinary like an immortal, he was merciless when it came to messing with people. For the time being, he didn't have the ability to compete with his big brother. Su Qingbai always knew what it meant to know one's own limitations. That girl called Yunge is not bad. Mr. Qingyun smiled and leisurely concluded. He looked at his most important eldest grandson and said, now that your second brother already has your third brother and fourth brother are about to get married. Our Su family isn't in a hurry to have an heir. Your father and I have never pressured you about your marriage, but you should think about it carefully. It can't be that you really plan to cultivate and become an immortal in the future, right? Grandfather, you're too serious. Qingchen understands. In front of Mr. Qingyun, Su Qingchen had always been very obedient. It's good that you understand. You don't have to rush him too much. Mr. Qingyun nodded with satisfaction and said to his two sons, however, since this matter is directed at you, you have to deal with it yourself. If you really like the daughter of a famous family, it's okay to marry her. But your sister is right. The Prince Ding mansion doesn't need a marriage alliance, and the Su family doesn't need one. Do you understand? Qingchen will remember grandfather's teachings. Su Qingchen replied in a deep voice. Su Qingchen and Su Qingbai walked out of the bamboo forest side by side and saw Qingzheng with Hua Tianxiang and a few children playing in a meadow full of flowers outside the bamboo forest. Su Qingbai's gaze turned from Mo Wuyo to Yunge, who was holding a bunch of flowers and smiling especially brightly. He said with a faint smile, in all these years, I've never seen a girl who can smile so happily. We have experienced too much, understood too much, and knew too much. Even if we are happy, it's hard to express it without restraint. Big brother, don't you think so? Following his gaze, Su Qingchen's expression softened slightly. On the green grassland, there were light purple, light yellow, light blue, and pink flowers decorating this piece of tender green heaven and earth. A beautiful yellow-clothed girl was holding a bouquet of colorful flowers, smiling happily. The faint sunlight sprinkled on her body. Her entire person seemed to have a faint layer of gentle light, making people feel warm from the heart. Chapter 1074. Su Qingbai was right. He had never seen a girl who could smile so happily. Even if she didn't do anything, just seeing her smile could make people feel that all their tiredness and unhappiness were swept away. Perhaps this was because her life was too simple and happy. Since young, she had never experienced any schemes and those dark things. She was very smart. She could clearly distinguish who was good to her and who was bad to her. Those who were good to her, she would repay them double. Those who were bad to her, she would simply throw them to the back of her mind and not pay them any attention. This was another kind of gratification and vengeance. Big brother, if there are flowers to pluck, then pluck them. Don't wait until there are no flowers to pluck. Su Qingbai smiled and left the sentence, then walked towards the group of people playing on the grass. Eldest uncle, fourth uncle, Mo Xiaobao, who was originally entangled with Su Zhirui, immediately rushed over when he saw the two people. Su Qingbai caught Mo Xiaobao and frowned, saying, Mo Xiaobao, you've gotten fat. Mo Xiaobao's delicate little face suddenly stiffened. After a while, he pitifully raised his little paw. Fourth uncle, I will soon be as thin as firewood and bones.
Why?
I was punished by mother, grounded for 3 months. Mo Xiaobao faintly said. Su Qingbai sympathetically patted his little head. Eat more these few days. Mo Xiaobao dejectedly drooped his head. Big brother, fourth brother. Qingzheng pulled Su Zhirui and greeted the two with a smile. Su Qingchen walked forward and nodded, saying, grandfather is almost done with the preparations. Everyone should also prepare to return to the city. Qinzheng also knew that tomorrow was the Prince Ding Mansion's birthday banquet, and there were still many things to do. She quickly nodded, saying, "Yes, let's go see if there's anything else to pack." Qinzheng left with the girls and children. Yunge naturally followed beside Imo. She secretly glanced at Su Qingchen and sighed in her heart. "Yunge, you come with me." Su Qingchen's faint voice came from behind. The smile on Yunji's face suddenly froze. She turned around and stared blankly at Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen strolled in front of her and asked, "Have you finished the homework I told you to do?" I'm done." Miss Yunge was at a loss. If they were not in Lishan Academy, she would have rushed to the study to get her homework for Su Qingchen to check. Su Qingchen frowned slightly and nodded. "Let's go." Yunge nodded repeatedly and followed closely behind Su Qingchen. However, no matter how one looked at her back, it was bleak and desolate. Looking at their departing figures from afar, Su Qingbai couldn't help but chuckle. "Fourth brother, what are you laughing at?" Su Qingfeng suddenly appeared behind him and asked curiously. Su Qingbai shook his head and turned around with a smile. "Big brother, are you thinking of taking in a disciple?" "Accept a disciple? What kind of disciple does Big brother have?" Su Qingfeng was at a loss. What could Su Qingchen teach as a disciple? How could he produce an immortal young master? Su Qingbai stroked his chin and said thoughtfully, "But why do I feel that Big brother treats Yunj like a student and a teacher? Furthermore, they are students and teachers who are very afraid of teachers." Su Qingfeng glanced at the two figures who had already walked far away. He lowered his head and couldn't help but feel amused. Needless to say, they really did look alike. After a long while, the two brothers looked at each other, and a very strange thought appeared in their minds. The genius, immortal young master. Could it be that he really doesn't eat the food of the common populace and doesn't know how to pursue the girl he likes? No one would believe that young Master Qingchen really treated Yunge as his own disciple. Miss Yunge was very smart and cute, but she had no interest in music, chess, calligraphy, painting, and especially in politics. Moreover, she wasn't smart enough to make young Master Qingchen look at her differently. Thinking of this, the two of them shivered. In this world, no one is perfect. Su Qingbai sighed. What sin did Miss Shin commit in her previous life to make Big Brother take a fancy to her? Su Qingfeng shook his head and said regretfully. Young Master Qingchen looked gentle and refined, but when he lectured someone, he only needed a faint look to make you feel so ashamed that you wished you had never been born. No wonder Miss Yunge looked at Su Qingchen like a mouse seeing a cat. The two brothers looked at each other and sent their most sincere blessings and prayers to Miss Yunge in their hearts. In a secluded little village outside Glass City, Emo Xiaoyao and Yili stood outside a simple house. Emo Xiaoyao's face was gloomy. Yili pulled his hand and shook it gently. Emo Xiaoyao looked down at Yili, and his face softened a little. Qin Feng stood not far from the two of them and said in a low voice, "Prince, Princess, they have left." Emo Xiaoyao looked at the simple house in front of him and said thoughtfully, "During this period, Emo Jingli has been living here? No one discovered him?" Qin Feng nodded and said, "This subordinate had people secretly ask around. The person living here during this period is a middle-aged man with a big beard. The time is the same as when Emo Jingli sneaked into the northwest, but he doesn't look like Emo Jingli at all." Big beard. Emo Xiaoyao's face flashed with a strange look. He changed his appearance. Qin Feng nodded and said, "Yes, he changed his appearance. He found some disguises in the room, but there was no trace of Princess Anqi or the little prince. The people nearby also said that they didn't see a woman or a baby." Emo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "Emo Jingli has become smarter now." Naturally, he wouldn't put Princess Anqi and the child together with himself. But if he really is living here, then Princess Anqi can't be too far away. Yili nodded in agreement with Emo Xiaoyao's opinion. She ordered, "With this place as the center, see if there's any place within a radius of 10 li that can hide someone." Qin Feng acknowledged and left. Emo Xiaoyao turned and pulled Yili, saying, "Let's go in and take a look." The two entered the room. Because the Prince Ding mansion had just been searched by the Shadow Guard, the room was a bit messy. But even in its original state, the room wasn't much better. There was a simple and crude table with 4 long stools, a bed made of wooden planks, and a shabby old cabinet. There were also some shabby clothes on the bed. Other than that, there was nothing useful. Yili sighed softly and said, "He's changed a lot. In the past, he wouldn't have been able to live in a place like this for so long." One could say that Emo Jingli was cruel and merciless, or that he was reckless and impulsive. In fact, Emo Jingli had never suffered much, so he always gave people a feeling that he was above everyone else. Living in such a shabby place for so long wasn't something that the old Emo Jingli would have been able to do. Emo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "People change. If he wants to live, he naturally has to endure some things that he couldn't do in the past. Now, it seems the effect is quite good. For Emo Jingli to reach such a state of complete defeat, it's obvious that he hasn't suffered enough. Only through suffering could one rise above others." This sentence was not just for show. If Emo Jingli's current situation was compared to 10 years ago, perhaps Emo Jingli's future would have been bright. Emo Xiaoyao rejoiced in Emo Jingli's misfortune, not realizing that he was the one who caused all of Emo Jingli's suffering. Chapter 1075. What is this? Yili lowered her head and picked up a delicate box from the foot of the bed. She frowned. She opened it. It was a box of light red rouge with the scent of osmanthus flowers. Yili frowned in confusion. Why is this here? Could it be Princess Anshi was kidnapped and brought here? Yili quickly realized that something was wrong. She shook her head. No, even if Princess Anshi is special, Emo Jingli wouldn't provide her with rouge. But from the looks of the rouge, it didn't look like it was left behind by the previous owner of this house. The value of this rouge was enough to cover the expenses of a family in this village for half a year. It's not bad, Qin Feng. Emo Xiaoyao took it and looked at it. A strange smile appeared on his face. He handed it to Qin Feng, who was waiting at the door. Qin Feng sniffed it and said in a low voice, "This is the rouge that the fragrance pavilion in Glass City started selling last month. It's called Guanghan Fragrance. You know a lot about it." Emo Xiaoyao looked at him with a faint smile. Qin Feng lowered his head in embarrassment. Yili smiled faintly. She remembered that Yaoji also liked the scent of osmanthus flowers. She shook her head. "I remember that the rouge from the fragrance pavilion is very expensive. Not many people can afford it. Go find out when it was bought." Qin Feng nodded in agreement. He turned and left to give orders. Emo Xiaoyao pulled Yili and said with a smile, "Let's go back. We won't find anything here. Tomorrow is the most important day."
Yili nodded. All right.
No matter what Emo Jingli wanted to do, he wouldn't miss tomorrow. They really should make more preparations. In a dark and secluded cave, Princess Anshi was holding a baby. She looked at the baby lovingly. The baby had just had some breast milk and had fallen asleep. Fortunately, the child was quite well behaved. In the past few days when they were locked up, Emo Jingli came to visit a few times. Coincidentally, the child was asleep and did not anger the person who had obviously gone crazy. She lowered her head and counted the days. Tomorrow was the first birthday banquet of the little heir and princess of the Prince Ding mansion. Princess Anshi knew that whatever Emo Jingli wanted to do, he would do it in the next 2 days. She sighed softly and looked at the baby in her arms. "Baby, don't be afraid. No matter what happens, Mother will protect you." A tall figure appeared at the entrance of the cave. Emo Jingli walked in, his entire body brimming with anger. He glared at Princess Anshi furiously. "You're so carefree." Princess Anshi looked up at him and said indifferently, "What else can I do when I'm locked up here? You've never been here at this time. What's the matter?" Emo Jingli sneered and said, "The people of the Prince Ding mansion found my hiding place. But you don't have to be happy. Even so, they can't find this place." Princess Anshi said, "I'm not happy." She could not relax for a moment until the child was out of danger. Naturally, she could not be happy. Mo Jingli snorted with satisfaction and said fiercely, "Get up and come with me." Princess Anshi was stunned and asked in confusion, "Where are we going?"
What?
"Are you addicted to being here? Don't you want to see your husband?" Mo Jingli sneered.
Give me the child.
Princess Anshi's expression changed. She hurriedly put the child behind her and said angrily, "Don't even think about it." "I'll say it again. Give me the child." Mo Jingli said in a low voice. "Impossible. What do you want my child for?" Princess Anshi said warily. Mo Jingli did not argue with her. He directly went to take the child. Princess Anshi wasn't a weak woman who couldn't even trust a chicken. Naturally, she wouldn't submit so easily. But she was holding the child in one hand. She had been locked up here for a few days and had not eaten much. Her physical strength was weak. After a few rounds, Mo Jingli subdued her and took the child from her. "Shua!" Princess Anshi cried anxiously. "Mo Jingli, what do you want? Give the child back to me." Mo Jingli held the child and glanced at Princess Anshi indifferently. "If he dares to act rashly again, I'll strangle him to death." Princess Anshi immediately froze. She did not dare to move her eyes and stared at Mo Jingli's hand on the child's neck. She was afraid that he would hurt the child if he used too much force. Seeing her like this, Mo Jingli nodded with satisfaction and said with a smile, "Very good. Someone will disguise you later and take you into the city. You'd better behave and not cause any trouble. Otherwise, I'll make sure you see this little thing die miserably." Princess Anshi's expression changed, and her face turned as pale as paper. "Don't hurt Shua. He's innocent. If you have any problems, come at me." Mo Jingli glanced at her and said with a smile, "Don't worry. As long as you're obedient, I won't hurt the child." "What a cute child. My son. I've never seen him when he was this old." Princess Anshi composed herself and said in a low voice, "You'd better keep your word." Mo Jingli smiled coldly. He turned and walked out with the child. Soon, he disappeared into the cave. Princess Anshi stared blankly at the entrance of the cave. After a while, she finally came back to her senses. "Shua, don't be afraid. Mother will save you." Princess Anshi murmured softly. A determined light flashed in her eyes. Two men in plain clothes rushed in from the entrance of the cave. They walked up to Princess Anshi and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, His Majesty ordered us to disguise you." Princess Anshi glanced at them coldly and said in a low voice, "Let's begin." Chapter 1076. On this day, Glass City was exceptionally lively. The last time it was so lively was a year ago at Master Qingyun's birthday banquet. But at that time, most of the guests who came to the banquet came with ulterior motives. But this time, they were all in a different mood. There was a complicated feeling of awe and admiration, as well as the vague intention of showing goodwill. In the past year, whether it was the Prince Ding mansion or the entire world, there had been earth-shaking changes. Anyone with eyes could see that there was no one in the world who could compete with Prince Ding. At least, there wouldn't be anyone in the next 10 years. And everyone couldn't help but worry that when the Prince Ding mansion regained its strength, it would once again send its troops to conquer the world. And when that time came, who would be able to resist the Prince Ding mansion's cavalry? If the allied forces of the three countries had not just been defeated, and if it wasn't for the fact that the difference in power and influence was too great, it would probably be another allied attack. But now, since they didn't have the strength to meet force with force, they could only show weakness. The banquet this time was held in the Prince Ding mansion. Because it was only the children's first birthday banquet, the Prince Ding mansion didn't invite too many guests. The guests were only the envoys of the various countries and the civil and military officials of the Prince Ding mansion. The other famous people of the various countries were not invited, so naturally, there weren't many guests. But the people of Glass City were still lively, as if it was a festival. In the inner courtyard of the Prince Ding mansion, the two babies woke up early in the morning and put on new, exquisite clothes. Yili carried them and played with Hua Tianxiang and the others who had already arrived. The two Madams Su and Qinzheng were busy with the banquet, so the children could only be left in the care of a few unmarried girls. "Mother,
Goddess.
Xian was wearing a pink dress embroidered with hibiscus. Around her neck was an exquisite jade longevity lock. Around her hands and feet were silver rings. Sitting in Mo Wuyu's embrace, she was as exquisite and beautiful as the jade girl beside goddess Guanyin in a painting. Wuyu smiled as she caressed Xian's little face and said, "Little Xian, mother is busy. I'll come and see you in a while." When she woke up early in the morning and did not see her mother, Xian was unhappy. Mother, mother. When Lin who was beside her, heard his sister call out mother, he also joined in the commotion. Moreover, Lin was clearly more mobile than his sister. He climbed up from the soft floor and wobbled his way out. Hua Tianxiang hurriedly carried him back. Lin be a good boy. Mother will come to see you in a while. Good baby, play with sister first. Hearing the word sister, Lin immediately tilted his head to look at Xian. By the time Hua Tianxiang put them together, the siblings had completely forgotten about looking for their mother. Everyone couldn't help but smile as they watched the brother and sister sitting on the wide, soft couch and babbling words that adults couldn't understand. Xian, big brother is here to see you. Outside the door, Mo Xiaobao brought Su Zhirui, Leng Junhan, and Qin Lai excitedly rushed in and stretched out his arms to hug Xian. Xian obviously liked Mo Xiaobao, her big brother, very much. She immediately stretched out her little hands to ask for a hug. Mo Xiaobao happily hugged his sister in his arms and looked at the other children as if showing off. However, he disdained his little brother in every possible way, thoroughly implementing the glorious tradition of the Prince Ding mansion where the girls were treasures and the boys were grass. Little Mo Yufeng, who was just 1 year old, also disliked his big brother. Seeing Mo Xiaobao carry away his sister who was with him every day, he immediately became angry. Xiaobao is bad. Big sister, big sister. Being called by his nickname by his little brother, Mo Xiaobao's handsome little face immediately darkened. Xian, who was in his arms, turned her head to look at her little brother, then looked at her big brother, who was holding her. She was in a difficult position for a moment, but still reached out to her little brother, who was on the soft couch. Little brother, helpless, Mo Xiaobao could only put his little sister back on the soft couch. Thus, the two little dolls hugged each other again. Mo Yufeng stared at Mo Xiaobao with his big watery eyes, as if the person in front of him was a big bad person who wanted to separate him and his little brother. Seeing Mo Xiaobao's face twisted in anger, everyone unkindly laughed out loud. Little heir, why did you come over? Mo Wuyo covered her mouth and asked with a smile. Mo Xiaobao had a good relationship with Mo Wuyo since he was young. Hearing her question, he smiled and said, "It's very busy outside. Mother disliked us for being a hindrance, so she let me come over to see my little brother and sister." Mo Wuyo nodded. Today was indeed very busy. Moreover, the princess of Nanzhao had gone missing and had not been found yet. The Prince Ding mansion was full of people coming and going, so it was not safe. In comparison, the inner courtyard that was heavily guarded and no outsiders were allowed to enter was much safer. Mo Wuyo smiled and said, "That's very good. Little heir, come with me and Tian Xiangyun good to take care of Lin and Xian." Mo Xiaobao looked resentfully at his younger brother and sister who were hugging each other lovingly on the couch. He really wasn't an evil mother-in-law who wanted to separate a pair of mandarin ducks, okay? No matter how lively the front courtyard of the Prince Ding mansion was, with people coming and going, the study in the inner courtyard was as quiet as usual. As the hosts, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili did not go out to receive guests. Instead, they leisurely sat in the study and read. With the Prince Ding mansion's current strength and status, there were very few guests that they could personally receive. Moreover, guests with truly high status would not arrive early. Mo Xiaoyao leisurely flipped through some unofficial history. He half reclined on the couch, his head resting on Yi Li's leg. His snow-white hair casually fell over Yi Li's knee, with a few strands falling to the ground. Reporting to Princess, the Queen of Nanzhao has entered the city. At the door, Zhuojing calmly reported. Mo Xiuyao flipped through a page and calmly replied, "Understood. Send someone to keep an eye on her. Save the Queen of Nanzhao when the time is right. Tell them not to act rashly and do their best to ensure the Queen's safety." This subordinate obeys. Yili frowned slightly and said, "What about the little prince?" Qin Feng was silent for a moment, then said in a low voice, "Yes, I haven't seen the little prince. However, we have already placed spies in all the places in Li City where people could be hidden. Therefore, this subordinate suspects that Mo Jingli may have hidden the little heir in a place that we would not suspect." Yili was silent. Of course she knew who Qin Feng was referring to. She lowered her head to look at Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao's eyes were half closed as he leisurely said, "Do what you need to do. You must save the little prince of Nanzhao. Right now, Nanzhao is very important to us." What was important was not Princess Anxi and the little prince, but their identities. In the past few years, the Prince Ding mansion had no plans to send any more troops. But even so, Xi Ling and the Dechu state still needed someone to keep them in check. And in the south, the valiant Nanjiang was naturally the best choice. At least for the next few decades, Nanzhao would be the Prince Ding mansion's ally. This subordinate understands. This subordinate will take his leave. With Mo Xiuyao's declaration, Qin Feng naturally had no more misgivings. He turned and left to handle matters. In the room, Yili calmly said, "Mo Jingli definitely has more than just Mo Jingyu under his control. Mo Jingyu had just arrived in Li City and had no foundation in Li City. Mo Jingli could enter and leave Li City without a trace. This was not something that Mo Jingyu could do. There must be someone who is extremely familiar with Li City's environment and various matters helping him in secret." Chapter 1077. Mo Xiuyao smiled faintly. "Of course. In this world, there are always people with ulterior motives who are waiting to betray you at any time. If not to catch these annoying bugs, why would I keep Mo Jingli here for so long?" "Will Mo Jingli be able to tell that you went easy on him?" Yili asked worriedly. If that was the case, Princess Anxi and the child would be in danger. Mo Xiuyao smiled. If Mo Jingli still wants to do something today, he will come whether he can tell or not. Besides, I'm guessing that he has been blinded by hatred for a long time. Even if I went easy on him, he won't be able to tell. "You know him well," Yili said with a frown. Actually, in Yili's view, Mo Jingli's hatred for Mo Xiuyao came out of nowhere. On the battlefield, victory and defeat were common. One had to bear the consequences of victory and defeat. It was unimaginable that Mo Jingli would hate Mo Xiuyao so much that he would lose his mind. Besides, Mo Jingli had fallen to such a state. Shouldn't he be more worried about the Chu state's Empress Dowager and the imperial family's betrayal and the West Hills' use of him? The Prince Ding mansion shouldn't be on the list. Mo Xiuyao smiled faintly. Of course, he wouldn't tell Yi Li what he had done to Mo Jingli. Chen Xiufu requests to see the prince's consort. A voice sounded from outside the door. Mo Xiuyao sat up and said coldly, "Come in." The door of the study was pushed open. Chen Xiufu walked in and bowed respectfully. "Greetings to the prince's consort." Yili smiled. "Mr. Xiuting, you don't have to be so courteous. You have just arrived in Glass City, and you are already so busy. Thank you for your hard work." Chen Xiufu cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Wang Fei, you're exaggerating. It's my duty, I don't dare to complain." These few days, Chen Xiufu did not have an easy time. Chen Xiufu even regretted that he had been tricked by Su Qingbai to come back with him. Once he reached Glass City, Prince Ding immediately announced that he was appointed as the left prime minister. Immediately, the faces of the aristocratic families of the Chu state, who were originally polite to him, changed. It was also true that the power of the military generals in King Ding's residence was held in the hands of the Mo family's military generals who were loyal to King Ding. As for the two positions that represented the highest civil officials, one was occupied by the eldest young master of the Su family, while the other was taken advantage of by him, an outsider from Xiling. How could this not anger the people who had been secretly scheming against each other these days? However, after being disciplined by Prince Ding, these people naturally did not dare to talk about Prince Ding's nepotism. Therefore, all their dissatisfaction was directed at him as the left prime minister. A strong dragon could not suppress a local snake. Although Chen Xiufu's abilities were not ordinary, he was still an outsider who had just arrived in Glass City. It was easy to imagine how difficult these few days were. Sometimes, Chen Xiufu could not help but suspect that Prince Ding had appointed him as the left prime minister to suppress these old aristocratic families of the Chu state. At the same time, it also prevented him, as the left prime minister, from colluding with these people. However, no matter why Prince Ding did this, Chen Xiufu knew that he would accept the position of left prime minister. It was not for power, nor was it because of Prince Ding's pressure. It was because only by standing higher could he realize his dreams and ambitions. What's the matter, left prime minister? He was different from Yi Li. Other than people who were close to him like Su Qingchen or old confidants of the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Xiaoyao had always called people by their names or titles. This made people feel the difference between close and distant. At first, it might make people feel uncomfortable, but it also made people more cautious. This meant that Prince did not treat you as a true confidant. People with ambition would naturally work harder to improve themselves, and those who wanted to dawdle would restrain themselves. More importantly, this also showed Prince Ding's high status and power. It made people want to submit to him involuntarily. Chen Xiufu nodded and said, reporting to Prince Genom of Gojoseon of Shilling requests an audience. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said, Ladingfeng, why is he here now? As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Xiaoyao's heart moved and said, Morong Shun and Marquis Nand. Chen Xiufu smiled and said, Yes, congratulations, Prince. I just received news that General Morong and Marquis Nan have been unstoppable. They are now approaching the border city of Shilling. The Shilling army has also been completely withdrawn. Hearing this news, not only Mo Xiaoyao but also Yi Li's mood became better. She smiled and said, It is indeed good news. If it were other officials, they would inevitably say a few words of flattery at this time. They would say that such good news came from the birthday banquet of the Crown Prince and Princess. The Crown Prince and Princess had great fortune, and so on. But Chen Xiufu would not. First, his character did not allow it. Second, Chen Xiufu was originally from Shilling. These flattering words would be too cold and heartless for him to say. Therefore, Chen Xiufu only silently waited for Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li's decision. Mo Xiaoyao stood up and said with a smile, Very well, please invite Genom of Gojoseon in. Speaking of which, Li Dechu State sent a message and asked them to send someone to discuss the issue of the 300,000 troops. Although it was Dechu State's troops that drove away Shilling's troops, Mo Xiaoyao did not intend to give up the land north of Yunlan River to Dechu State. If it were not for Morongshun and Marquis Nan, a mere 300,000 troops would be nothing more than food for Shilling. Since he had put in the effort, he naturally could not go without benefits. Although Dechu State had Mo Jingyu, in Mo Xiaoyao's eyes, Mo Jingyu was almost a dead man. Naturally, Dechu State needed to send someone else to negotiate. Yi Li nodded and said, I understand. Prince Ding, Princess, Sir Xiaoding. Lei Tingfeng stepped into the parlor outside the study and calmly nodded to the two. His expression was so calm that it was impossible to tell that he had just received the news of Shilling's defeat. Yi Li smiled and nodded. Genom of Gojoseon, there is no need to be so polite. Please sit. Lei Tingfeng sat down and glanced at Chen Xiufu, who was sitting on the left with a complicated expression. This person was originally one of Shilling's top Confucian scholars. His ability, wisdom, and ideas were all top-notch. It was a pity that he had not achieved anything important in Shilling for decades. Who would have thought that in just a few years after the fall of Emperor of Shilling City, he would be promoted to the position of left Prime Minister of Prince Ding Mansion? Should it be said that Mo Xiaoyao appointed people based on their merits, or were the others blind? Genom of Gojoseon, what's the matter? Mo Xiaoyao leaned back in his chair and asked leisurely. Lei Tingfeng smiled bitterly and helplessly in his heart. Compared to Mo Xiaoyao, his aura was weaker. Furthermore, he was the one who had a request, so he had to lower himself even more by taking the initiative to visit. But thinking of the news that had just come back from the battlefield, Lei Tingfeng knew that he had to put down his pride. Now, there were only the 300,000 soldiers of Dechu State and Marquis Morongshen and Marquis Nan on the border of Xiling. But now that the war in the Central Plains had been settled, if Emo Shuyao was willing, he could send the cavalry and generals of the Mahist army to the south to reinforce Morongshen and Marquis Nan. At that time, it would really be a disaster for Xiling. Saluting, Lei Tingfeng said in a low voice, "To be honest, I came to disturb Prince and Princess Consort today because of the truce between our two armies." Prince and Princess Consort must have received the battle report from the front lines. The Xiling army has already retreated to the border between Xiling and Dechu State. Chapter 1078. Emo Shuyao nodded, frowning as he said, "A truce between the two armies is naturally a good thing. These past few years of continuous campaigns have caused the common people to suffer unspeakably. Genom of Gojoseon has the intention to quell the war, and I am very happy. However, the ones fighting the Western Tomb are the troops of the Dechu State. I'm afraid that this matter will only be settled after a meeting with King Yu of the Dechu State." Lei Tingfeng raised his eyebrows, looking at Emo Shuyao as he said seriously, "Why is Prince Ding like this? You and I both understand, although the ones fighting are the troops of Southern Shu, isn't it still up to Prince Ding to decide whether to fight or to make peace? Moreover, I'm afraid that King Yu won't have the chance to discuss this matter with you and me. Currently, the affairs of the Western Tomb State are busy, and I can't wait for the time when Southern Shu sends out an envoy. I hope that His Highness Prince Ding will be magnanimous enough to forgive us." Emo Shuyao sized up Lei Tingfeng with interest for a while before smiling and saying, "It looks like Genom of Gojoseon is really well informed." Lei Tingfeng said with an indifferent smile, "Prince Ding also knows of the relationship between the Emperor of Xiling and the infinite boundless mountain. Naturally, he has some special channels for information." Emo Shuyao nodded absent-mindedly, saying, "Since Genom of Gojoseon has this sincerity, I naturally don't want to cause any more trouble. However, there are still some things that we need to make clear in advance." Lei Tingfeng frowned slightly. "Our army will completely withdraw from the Dechu State. In addition, I's information on the Dechu State and Mo Jingli can also be given to Prince Ding. I wonder if His Highness Prince Ding has any other requests?" Emo Shuyao raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Well, of course it's compensation. The South is rich, and West Hill has benefited a lot from the Central Plains over the years. Has Genom of Gojoseon never thought of compensating the people of the Central Plains?" Lei Tingfeng looked at Emo Xuyao's carefree little face in silence. Actually, Lei Jinting and Lei Tingfeng were wrong to say that the West Hill had treated the people of the Central Plains. After all, Xiling and the northern tribes were different. Although they belonged to two different countries, they were of the same origin. Moreover, Lei Jinting had always treated the place as his own territory. In terms of intelligence, Lei Jinting's ability was not something Mo Jingli or Mo Jingqi could compare to. Therefore, in general, the lives of these people were not bad. However, Lei Tingfeng was the one who had lost the war and was the one who had taken the initiative to invade. As the victim and the victor, he had no reason to refuse the compensation. Taking a deep breath, Lei Tingfeng lowered his eyes and said, "West Hill can compensate the Prince Ding mansion with 30 million taels of silver." Mo Shuyao shook his head. 80 million taels. Most of West Hill's silver mines are in the south. West Hill should be able to afford this, right? Lei Tingfeng's expression changed. He shook his head and said, "At most 40 million taels." Mo Shuyao naturally understood the logic of asking for a sky-high price and asking for a low price. He tilted his head and smiled at Yi Li, then raised his hand to Lei Tingfeng and said, 70 million taels. No, 45 million taels. Prince Ding, West Hill cannot afford a higher price. If you really can't, I can't do anything. What he meant was that Prince Ding's price was too high. If West Hill could not afford it, then they might as well fight to the death. Mo Shuyao looked at Yi Li and Chen Xiufu with some regret. He smiled and said, well, let's round it up. 50 million taels. Lei Tingfeng's face was livid. He said in a low voice, okay, pay it over 3 years. Mo Xiaoyao was not short of money. 3 years was not a long time, so he was not in a hurry. He nodded with satisfaction and said, no problem. Then, I thank Genom of Gojoseon for your understanding. I will immediately order Morong Shen and Marquis Nand to withdraw their troops. I hope West Hill will also abide by the agreement? Of course, Lei Tingfeng said in a low voice. Lei Tingfeng agreed readily. Mo Xiaoyao was also in a good mood. He nodded with satisfaction and said, great. In that case, let's leave the rest of the trivial matters to the subordinates. Let's let ministers would be in charge of this matter. Chun Xiufu was stunned. He quickly stood up and said, yes, sir. Chun Xiufu understood that this was trust in him and also a test for him. The matter of negotiating with West Hill was left to him, a West Hill citizen, to be in charge. Even if Prince Ding had expressed his trust in him to the officials of Glass City and entrusted him with important tasks. Lei Tingfeng was stunned. He looked at Chun Xiufu and nodded. In that case, I will have to trouble Minister Chen. Today, the Prince Ding mansion is busy. I will take my leave first. Chun Xiufu said indifferently. Genom of Gojoseon is too serious. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, then I will not accompany Genom of Gojoseon. Minister Zhua, I will leave West Hill's matters to you. Yes, Genom of Gojoseon, please. Lei Tingfeng and Chun Xiufu said their goodbyes and left the flower hall. Yili looked at the empty doorway and said indifferently, Lei Tingfeng compared to Lei Jinting, he is still a little inexperienced. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, it is already not bad. He can't become the second Lei Jinting in the border city after Lei Jinting's death. Also, he can't become Lei Jinting. But to be able to endure is already not bad. Lei Jinting had fought his way out of the many princes of the late West Hill Emperor. Even though he did not sit on the throne, he took over the power after the late West Hill Emperor passed away. This ability was not something that Lei Tingfeng, who had been pampered and protected by Lei Jinting since he was young, could have. It was already very good that Lei Tingfeng could hold his ground at the crucial moment and endure when he needed to. In time, he should become a good lord of preservation. But to be as awe-inspiring as when Lei Jinting was still around, it would be a little difficult. Li, why do you care about how he is? You should think about how we are going to spend the 40 million compensation from West Hill. Mo Xiaoyao hugged Yi Li and laughed softly. 40 million was definitely not a small amount for the Prince Ding mansion or West Hill. Otherwise, Lei Tingfeng would not have insisted on paying it off in 3 years. With this money, the Prince Ding mansion's losses from the war over the past few years would basically be covered. Not to mention the territory under the Prince Ding mansion's control today, which was close to 4/5 of the former De Chu state's territory and 1/3 of West Hill's territory. Now, the Prince Ding mansion's area was larger than the existing West Hill and De Chu states combined. Now that everything had been temporarily settled, all the benefits had been taken by the Prince Ding mansion. Yili looked curiously at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, how do you want to spend it? The war compensation was naturally put into the Prince Ding mansion's treasury. Obviously, Mo Xiaoyao had no room to spend it however he wanted. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao had always separated public from private matters. Even if the entire Prince Ding mansion belonged to them, the two of them would never use the money in the public account for personal use. Fortunately, the two of them were not people who liked extravagance, so they never had to worry about money. Mo Xiaoyao played with Yi Li's hair. Thinking about Yi Li's words, he felt a bit helpless. I want to build a beautiful palace for Miss Li. Seeing his dejected appearance, Yi Li couldn't help but smile. A few days ago, you said that you would accompany me to go sightseeing in a few years. When your palace is built, who will live in it? Mo Xiaoyao raised his head to look at her and said seriously, I want to give Miss Li the most magnificent and exquisite palace, the most beautiful clothes and jewelry, and the most exquisite delicacies. As long as Li wants it, I will find it for Miss Li. Yi Li smiled at him and said with a faint smile, I didn't know that I had the potential to be a beauty who could destroy a country. A waste of money and manpower. I just want our family to be safe and happy together. I just want to be able to do what I want to do. After so many years, seeing that we can live peacefully and happily, I feel like I've already gotten what I want. Miss Lee has never told me what she wants, Mo Xiaoyao said with a bit of regret and unwillingness. Miss Lee did not have any extravagant desires for power, clothes, and jewelry. Even Mo Xiaoyao was not sure what she liked or hated. This was something that Prince Ding was always worried about. Because what I want you've already given me, Yili said with a faint smile. Given you? Mo Xiaoyao was a bit confused. Yili leaned into his embrace and said softly, a lifetime, a generation, a pair. Only this is what I want. Mo Xiaoyao stilled. He raised a hand to tightly wrap around her slender waist and said in a low voice, a lifetime, a generation, a pair. Mo Xiaoyao, in this life, only has Miss Lee, there was no oath or pledge of eternal love. Mo Xiaoyao just said it lightly. It was like a simple statement, but it was more comforting than any oath. Yili nodded slightly. I know. I also feel the same. Chen Xiufu accompanied Lei Tingfeng out of the study. The two walked side by side. Lei Tingfeng looked at Chen Xiufu beside him and couldn't help but smile. It seems that Mr. Xiaoding is greatly valued by Prince Ding and Wang Fei in the Prince Ding mansion. Chen Xiufu said seriously. Chen Xiaoding is very grateful for Prince and Wang Fei's kindness. Lei Tingfeng thought for a moment and asked with a smile, if I am willing to make you the Prime Minister of West Hill, would you be willing to deign to return to West Hill and assist I? Chen Xiufu looked at him calmly for a moment and shook his head gently. A loyal minister will not serve two masters. Chen Xiaoding does not dare to claim to be loyal, but I am also not a two-faced and indecisive person. Chen Xiaoding does not dare to accept Genom of Gojoseon's kindness. Lei Tingfeng was originally just testing him. Naturally, he didn't expect Chen Xiufu to change sides and return to West Hill so easily. But Lei Tingfeng felt a little uncomfortable after being rejected so cleanly by Chen Xiufu. He stopped and looked at Chen Xiufu, asking, does Mr. Xiaoding have any advice on the current situation of West Hill? This you should be able to say. Chen Xiufu hesitated for a moment and finally said, a ruler is not a ruler, a minister is not a minister, or a minister is not a minister, or a minister is strong and a master is weak. This is not the way to go in the long run. Genom of Gojoseon should make plans early. Lei Tingfeng was stunned and wanted to ask again, but Chen Xiufu didn't intend to say anything more. He turned sideways and raised his hand to Lei Tingfeng. Genom of Gojoseon, please. Lei Tingfeng could only suppress the questions in his heart and nodded. Prime Minister Chen, please. Chapter 1079. Chen Xiufu and Lei Tingfeng walked out of the gate, and two people appeared at the corner of the corridor. One of the two men was dressed in snow-white clothes, while the other was dressed in fiery red clothes. Feng Jiao looked at the place where the two men stood and frowned. Prince gave Mr. Xiaoding the matter of West Hill to handle. Will there be any problem? It was not that he did not believe in Chen Xiufu's loyalty to the Prince Ding mansion, but Chen Xiufu was originally from West Hill. It was more troublesome to give this matter to him than to an ordinary subordinate of the Prince Ding mansion. Chen Xiufu might be put in an awkward position. Su Qingchen shook his head slightly and said indifferently, with Mr. Xiaoding's ability, it is not difficult to handle this matter. His character is absolutely trustworthy. Therefore, Prince Ding handed this matter to him to handle. As long as he can handle this matter well, he will be able to sit firmly in the position of left Prime Minister. No one can say anything. Feng Jiao nodded. Anyway, he was far inferior to Mo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen when it came to guessing people's minds. Since these two people felt that there was no problem, naturally there was no problem. The week of catching is about to begin, but these two parents are missing. Let's go and remind them. Otherwise, the guests will wait for a long time. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, they are in the study. I will go to the inner yard to bring Lin and Xian out. I will have to trouble you to inform them. Feng Jiao watched Mr. Qingchen leave and shrugged. He turned and walked in the direction of the study. The Prince Ding Mansion's week of catching was set at noon after lunch. After the guests came to the mansion to watch the two little princes and the little princess's week of catching, they could directly participate in the evening banquet after a short rest. In fact, for one-year-old children, the so-called evening banquet was not important. Those who participated were all adults. For them, the most important thing was catching. In the inner courtyard, Hua Tianxiang and the others were circling around the two babies. Because they were worried that the babies would be sleepy, they had coaxed them to sleep in the morning. When Su Qingchen arrived, the two babies had just woken up and were full of energy. Especially the more lively Lin Er, he was crawling here and there. He even wanted to climb up and down. The girls and the child's wet nurse could only keep an eye on him, afraid that he would accidentally bump into something. Xian on the other hand, was quite quiet. She just sat on the soft couch obediently and watched her brother walk around on the floor. She clapped her little hands and cheered as she crawled around. Hearing his sister's voice, Lin became even more excited and began to toss and turn even more violently. Yaya, ninth uncle. On the soft couch, Xian pointed at the door and called out happily. Everyone looked at the door and saw Su Qingchen standing at the door looking at Xian with a smile. Mo Wu pinched Xian's little face and smiled. Little girl, when the time comes, you'll be smart enough to call me uncle and recognize people. Su Qingchen came in and bent down to carry Xian. He smiled and said, Xian, are you calling uncle?
Hee.
For a long time. Uncle. Xian obviously liked this uncle of hers very much. She sat in Su Qingchen's arms and giggled nonstop. Lin looked at his sister and then at Su Qingchen, who was standing in front of him. He walked over shakily and tugged at Su Qingchen's clothes. Hug, sister. Su Qingchen looked at Xian in his arms and then at Lin who was tugging at his clothes. His face stiffened. Everyone looked at the elegant young Master Qingchen carrying a child in one hand and another child tugging at his clothes at his feet. They suddenly felt that this scene was funny no matter how they looked at it. Young Master Qingchen and the matter of carrying a child seemed to be completely unrelated. Mo Wu leaned on Hua Tianxiang's shoulder and covered his mouth to stifle his laughter. Su Qingchen looked at the two babies in front of him helplessly. Although young Master Qingchen was famous, Su Qingchen's children were not very popular. For example, Su Zhiwei from the Su family and Leng Junhan, who was like a little demon, did not like to get close to Su Qingchen. However, it was clear that the children of the Prince Ding mansion would like this uncle very much. Su Qingchen could only put Xian down helplessly. He squatted down and hugged the two babies in his arms. The excited babies smiled and comforted him. Big brother, why are you here too? At the door, Yili looked at everyone with a smile. Behind him, Mo Xiaoyao glanced at the two children who were playing happily in Su Qingchen's arms. He walked forward and reached out to Xian. Xian blinked her bright eyes and smiled innocently at Mo Xiaoyao. Daddy, hug. Nyang nyang. Mo Xiaoyao carried his daughter in his arms proudly. Lin Me leaned in Su Qingchen's arms and blinked at Mo Xiaoyao. He pouted and turned around to face Mo Xiaoyao with his butt. Children, especially children who had been together all the time, would always want to do whatever one of them did. Lin might not really like Mo Xiaoyao hugging him, but seeing that Mo Xiaoyao only hugged his sister and ignored him, he still felt unhappy. Mo Xiaoyao bent down and picked Lin up from Su Qingchen's arms. He smiled and said, Little brat, you know how to be jealous of your sister at such a young age. Lin didn't feel uncomfortable being picked up by his clothes. Instead, he shook his little body and giggled. Mo Xiaoyao had always been gentle and loving when he carried his daughters, but he wasn't so polite when he carried a boy. Even Mo Xiaobao was carried around when he was young. Yili stepped forward and took Lin from his arms. She glanced at him reproachfully before looking at Su Qingchen with a smile. Big brother, are you free now? I didn't expect you to come here. Su Qingchen glanced at Mo Xiaoyao unhappily and said, How could I be free? Father, second uncle, and chief steward Mo are watching outside. I came in to rest for a while. Also, The auspicious hour is about to arrive. I came to see if Lin, and Xian are ready. Mo Xiaoyao didn't mind. What do they need to prepare? Wasn't it just a matter of putting things on the table and letting them grab whatever they wanted? Su Qingchen smiled, but didn't say anything. She walked to the side and sat down. She looked around the room and asked, "Aren't Xiaobao and the others here?" Hua Tianxiang said, "They just said it was boring in the inner courtyard and wanted to go out and watch the fun." Su Qingchen frowned and nodded. "Tell them to be careful. There are a lot of people today." Mo Xiaoyao smiled. "I sent people to follow them. Nothing will happen." Not long after, the auspicious hour arrived. The ceremony was set to be held in the main hall of the Prince Ding Mansion's front yard. When Mo Xiaoyao and Yili arrived with the two babies, the main hall was already filled with guests. Lei Tingfeng, Mo Jingyu, Yalu Hong, and the other envoys were all present. Even Pu A, who had just been injured and was worried about the safety of Princess Anxi and the little prince, was present. There were also the civil and military officials of the Prince Ding Mansion. As long as they were in Glass City, they were all high-ranking officials. Naturally, the one sitting at the head of the table was the white-haired Sir Qingyun. Seeing Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao arrive together, everyone hurriedly stood up to greet them. Chapter 1080. Grandfather. Yili walked in front of Master Qingyun and lightly smiled. Master Qingyun smiled as he took Lin from her hands and smiled. "I haven't seen you for a month. These two children have grown up a bit." Yili nodded and smiled. "Children grow up quickly. It won't be long before they can run around. Lin call me Tai Gong." Although Lin was still young, he was very clever. In the past year, he had seen Master Qingyun quite a bit, so he naturally had an impression of this white-bearded old man. He happily grabbed Master Qingyun's white beard and called out, "Tai Gong." Master Qingyun's wrinkled face also revealed a kind smile. "Good child, Lin is obedient, Tai Gong." Xian who was in Mo Xiaoyao's embrace, was not to be outdone. The smile on Master Qingyun's face deepened. Whether it was the Su family or the Prince Ding Mansion, girls were very rare. Naturally, they were loved even more. Master Qingyun repeatedly nodded and said, "Good child, Lin, and Xian are both very good." Master Qingyun took out a pair of jade pendants and gave one to Lin, and Xian. Yili lowered her head to look. It was a pair of Qi Lin and Phoenix jade pendants. The jade was the highest quality mutton fat white jade. It was completely white and lustrous without any impurities. The carving was very exquisite, and Yili felt that it was very familiar. Yili remembered that she also had a jade pendant like this. However, it was made of green jade and carved with magnolia flowers. It was given to her by her grandfather when she was born. It was said that her grandfather personally carved it. Everyone only knew that Master Qingyun was extremely talented, but they didn't know that Master Qingyun was also proficient in many other skills. Even the art of carving that normal scholars would not be interested in could be called a master. These two jade pendants were clearly carved by Master Qingyun himself. Master Qingyun was now over 80 years old. It was not easy for him to carve these two exquisite jade pendants. Yili's eyes were slightly red. She looked at Master Qingyun and said in a low voice, "Grandfather, Lin and Xian are still young. You don't have to." Master Qingyun shook his head. As he played with Lin in his arms, he said, "It's not good for children to carry ancient jade around. This jade is not bad. It's perfect to make a jade pendant for the two children. What's wrong with that?" Xian was still in Mo Xiaoyao's hands. She held the jade pendant in one hand and waved at Master Qingyun excitedly. "Grandpa, great-grandpa, Xin hug." As she spoke, she kicked her legs and wanted to walk towards Master Qingyun. Mo Xiaoyao had no choice but to place her on Mr. Qingyun's couch. Fortunately, the couch was very wide. Because Master Qingyun was old, he had specially laid out a thick cushion, so he didn't have to worry about her bumping into anything. Seeing his great-granddaughter being so close to him, even Mr. Qingyun couldn't help but smile. The people sitting below looked at this family and couldn't help but feel emotional. Whether it was Yi Li, Mo Xiaoyao, or the Su family, they were all very eye-catching people. Now that so many people were standing around Master Qingyun and laughing, it made people feel that the heavens really were biased. Looking at the two little children sitting next to Master Qingyun, everyone couldn't help but reveal an expression of jealousy and envy. Yi Li, who was standing beside Mr. Qingyun, was stunned when she looked down. She saw that in an inconspicuous corner not far from the palace, Yi Wenhua was standing there alone. His expression was a bit complicated as he looked at her, or it could be said that he was looking at Lin who was holding her hand and babbling non-stop. Ever since Yi Wenhua came to Glass City, he rarely went out. He rarely even saw outsiders, so there weren't many people who could recognize him. Seeing that Yi Li was stunned, Mo Xiaoyao also looked over. Naturally, he also saw Yi Wenhua. Gently hugging Yi Li, Mo Xiaoyao said softly, "Li, if you have anything to say, just say it to him." Mo Xiaoyao didn't really like or dislike Yi Wenhua. The most he disliked was that he felt that Yi Li was wronged by Yi Wenhua. Although it couldn't be said that it was all because of Yi Wenhua, at least Yi Wenhua as a father didn't treat Yi Li well. In these few years, Yi Wenhua had been well-behaved in Glass City. He didn't use his identity as Princess Ding's father to have any delusions. Therefore, Mo Xiaoyao's attitude towards him was a bit better. Occasionally, during festivals, he would have people send some gifts to the Yi family. After all, no matter how close Yi Li was to the Su family, her surname was still Yi. Compared to her family in the Prince Ding mansion who was poor and couldn't make a living, spending some money to let Yi Wenhua enjoy his old age was obviously better for Yi Li's reputation. Of course, this was on the premise that Yi Wenhua was well-behaved and knew when to advance or retreat. Yi Li sighed slightly and nodded. Towards Yi Wenhua, this father, she really didn't have any feelings. No matter if it was love or hate, she didn't have any feelings. She just felt sorry for her mother. Yi Li's impression of Yi Wenhua couldn't even compare to her parents in her previous life, who had been together for more than 20 years. Even though her parents in her previous life were just as busy, they didn't spend much time together when they were young. After entering the military academy, they rarely saw each other once a year. However, they still left a deeper impression on her than Yi Wenhua. Father. In the quiet side hall, Yi Li calmly looked at Yi Wenhua, who had already aged a little. Yi Wenhua was only in his early 50s, but his hair was already white. He was wearing an inconspicuous scholar's robe. Compared to more than 10 years ago when he was in Chujing City, he looked more like a scholar. They hadn't seen each other for more than a year, and Yi Wenhua had also aged a lot. Yi Yu and Yi Ying had passed away in the past year. These two were Yi Wenhua's beloved daughters. No matter what, he couldn't help but feel sad. Yi Li. Seeing Yi Li walk in, Yi Wenhua looked a little embarrassed. He used to think that his first wife's daughter was inconspicuous. He used to hate her. He used to think that he didn't have a daughter. Now, she had grown into a legendary woman who was admired by the whole world without him as her father. Actually, as a father, he couldn't help much. Yi Wenhua smiled bitterly. "Father, please sit down," Yi Li said softly. Speaking of which, this time, the subordinates in the Prince Ding mansion didn't think it through. They forgot to send an invitation to the Yi family for Lin and Xian's first birthday party. Of course, a large part of this was caused by Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao's attitude. Yi Wenhua nodded and sat down. Immediately, a maid came over to serve tea, and then left. The two of them drank tea in silence for a while. Yi Li then asked, "Long time no see. Father, how are you?" "Good, good. Your grandmother is also very good." Yi Wenhua nodded. Yi Li smiled faintly. If she didn't have any feelings for Yi Wenhua, then she didn't have any feelings for old Madame Yi either. After all, Yi Wenhua loved her when she was young. After her mother passed away, he would occasionally help her. However, old Madame Yi didn't like her mother when her mother was still alive. When she looked at her, there were no feelings other than calculation and indifference in her eyes. Yi Wenhua also understood that Yi Li wasn't interested in this topic. He raised his hand and took out a wooden box from his sleeve. He put it on the table and said, "Today is the two children's birthday. This is my gift to them." Chapter 1081. Yili took the wooden box from Qin Feng and opened it. She looked at Yi Wenhua in surprise. There was a piece of warm jade and a pair of jade bells in the old box carved from red sandalwood. She had seen the warm jade before. It was said to be a family heirloom of the Yi family. It was a very valuable piece of warm jade. Old Madame Yi used it to show off. It was said that the ancestors of the Yi family were from a prestigious family. Later, when Wang gave birth to Yi Rong, Yi Wenhua didn't give it to her even though she wanted it. Although she had never seen the jade bells before, they were definitely more valuable than the warm jade. The delicate bells were carved out of white suet jade. There were 2 jade beads in the hollow and delicate patterns. They jingled when shaken gently. It was very pleasant to hear. "This is too valuable," Yili said. The Yi family was no longer the Yi family in Chujing City. Moreover, the Yi family was not rich. The 2 gifts that Yi Wenhua gave were probably more valuable than all the assets of the Yi family combined. Yi Wenhua waved his hand and rejected the box that Qin Feng brought back. He said, "I only have these 2 things that I can take out to show people. If I give them to the 2 children, they can be playthings. If I leave them in the Yi family, they will be gone soon. Moreover, these jade bells were left behind by your mother. Just give them to Xian to play with." Seeing that Yi Wenhua was so insistent, Yili had no choice but to accept them. She said softly, "I thank you on behalf of the 2 children." Yi Wenhua shook his head and didn't say anything. Yili thought for a while and asked, "Is Suyan okay?" When Su Qingchen came back from Jiangnan, she brought Mo Suyun back. But Mo Suyun was weak and timid. No one from the Princeton mansion or the Su family took care of him. Yili had discussed with Su Qingchen to send the children to the Yi family. Yi Wenhua sighed. He is okay. He had changed his name to Yi Su. That child had suffered a lot and was not very courageous. And his body. Mo Suyun's body was really ruined beyond recognition. Even if Xinyang and Dr. Lin personally checked his pulse, they both shook their heads, indicating that they were not sure that Mo Suyun could live past the age of 20. In the past 6 months, Mo Wuyu would visit him every half a month to check on him. It was just a matter of dragging it out. Mo Wuyu didn't know that Mo Suyun wasn't Mo Jingqi's son, so he pitied his half-brother. Yili said, "If his body needs any medicine, just let Worryless come to the Princeton mansion to get it." Yi Wenhua nodded. The father and daughter were speechless. After a long while, Yi Wenhua said in a low voice, "Li Ying's funeral?" Yili looked down and said softly, "Fourth sister didn't want to leave the Li palace. After she died, Li Wang used the power of the princess to bury her." Yi Wenhua let out a long sigh and said, "That's good, that's good." In the first half of his life, he had been obsessed with fame and fortune. He had taught his only son badly. Among his daughters, only Yili, the daughter of the first wife, lived a peaceful life. Yili was the only one who lived a happy life. But this kind of happiness was obtained by Yili after going through many things. These years, although Yi Wenhua didn't go out, he knew what he should know. The things that Yili went through these years, not to mention ordinary women, even most men couldn't bear it. As a father, he had nothing to say except for pride. Looking at Yi Wenhua's old and sad appearance, Yili couldn't help but feel sad. With a sigh, Yili asked, "Father, do you still remember concubine Zhao?" Yi Wenhua was stunned. After a long while, he remembered that he had such a favored concubine in the past. Concubine Zhao was very favored for a period of time. Otherwise, Madame Wang wouldn't have thought of her as a threat. But her status was too low, and the time she spent with Yi Wenhua was too short. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years had passed. Yi Wenhua didn't have a deep impression of her. Didn't she go to Yinzhou? Yi Wenhua was puzzled. He didn't understand why Yili would mention this woman who hadn't been heard from for more than 10 years. Yili nodded and said, "That's right. Father, do you still remember that she was 3 months pregnant when she left Chujing?" You mean she... Yi Wenhua couldn't help but stand up in shock. After receiving Qin Feng's warning gaze, he realized that he had forgotten himself. But the impact of the child was too big for him. Li Lier. Yili nodded calmly and said, "That's right. I knew it before the news spread. She came to me and begged me that Madame Wang would hurt her and the child. But I was about to marry into the Prince Ding mansion at that time. I didn't have time to care about her. So I suggested that she go to Yunzhou. In Yunzhou, the Su family could take care of her more or less. Then, the child is..." Yi Wenhua asked carefully. Yi Rong had completely disappointed him. If the child was a boy, it would be Yi Wenhua's only hope. But if it was a girl, Yi Wenhua was a little uneasy. Yili looked down and said lightly, "It's a boy. He's 12 years old this year. When the child was born, concubine Zhao wrote to me and asked about it. I named the child Yian." Lear, thank you. As a father, I have always... Yi Wenhua's eyes were red. He looked at Yi Li guiltily. All these years, Yi Wenhua had thought about the child. But when he sent people to look for the child, the Yi family's residence in Yunzhou had already changed owners. Concubine Zhao was also nowhere to be found. Yi Li shook her head and said, "The child is now studying in Lishan Academy." Not long after the Su family moved to Glass City, concubine Zhao also sold the residence in Yunzhou and moved to Glass City. Now, she bought some land not far from Lishan Academy and is living there. Thank you, Li Er. Yi Wenhua didn't know what else to say. He could only repeat it. Yi Li smiled and said lightly, "Don't mention it. He's also my brother. Father, if you have time, you can go and see concubine Zhao and Xian. I also heard that Madame Wang has been making trouble for the past 2 years." Yi Wenhua was stunned and quickly said, "Don't worry. I will control them well. I won't let the Yi family ruin your reputation." Yi Li shook her head lightly and didn't say anything. Chapter 1082. Princess Consort. Zhuojing walked into the side hall and looked at Yi Li and Yi Wenhua before greeting respectfully. Yi Li nodded and asked with a smile, "What's the matter?" Zhuojing said, "His Highness said that the little heir and little princess's catching ceremony is about to begin and asked the princess to attend." Yi Li nodded and asked, "Has the heir arrived?" Zhuojing shook his head and said, "I haven't seen the heir." Yi Li helplessly indicated for Zhuojing to go find Mo Shabao first. She stood up and smiled at Yi Wenhua. "Father, let's go. It's about to start." Yi Wenhua paused and quickly nodded. "All right, let's go." When they entered the main hall, it was already bustling with noise and excitement. The Prince Ding mansion had prepared a large table that was 5 to 6 feet long. There were all kinds of things on it. Su Qingyan and Su Qingfeng each held one in their arms. When they saw Yi Li walk over, they immediately stretched out their little hands towards Yi Li happily. Yi Li smiled and stroked the babies' little faces, asking, "Has it started?" Chief Steward Mo said in a low voice, "The auspicious hour has arrived. The prince and princess can begin to catch the prince." Yi Li clapped her hands and smiled. "Let them pass." Su Qingyan giggled as he placed Lin on the table. Su Qingfeng also placed Xian on the table. The two babies looked curiously at everything in front of them. Although there were so many pairs of eyes staring at them, the two babies did not have stage fright. Instead, they excitedly fiddled with the things on the table. Xian picked up a small abacus made of gold and curiously fiddled with it. Han Mingxi couldn't help but smile. Could it be that the princess wants to be a wealthy merchant in the future? Before he finished speaking, Xian giggled and quickly stuffed the small abacus into Lin Ber's arms. Lin looked at the little toy in his hand suspiciously. He tilted his little head and thought for a moment. Then he turned his little body and placed the little abacus behind him. Then he grabbed a book beside him and stuffed it into Xian's arms. Xian did not dare to show weakness. She chuckled as she grabbed a pen not far away and stuffed it into Lin Ber's hands. Thus, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the two siblings started to play with one another. Feng Jiao stared dumbfoundedly at the siblings who were still playing happily in front of him. What are they doing? Yi Li looked at the small piles of things behind the siblings and couldn't help but smile. She didn't know what they were doing. After thinking about it, Yi Li clapped her hands and smiled at the two babies, Lin Xian. Pick something you like and give it to Mother. It wasn't clear whether the two children understood Yili's words or not, but when they saw Yili open her arms, Lin took the lead and got up first after a moment of hesitation. He walked up and down the long table and soon came back with a pair of things. Among them, there was an exquisite little sword, a small red sandalwood box, and a picture scroll. However, his two small hands couldn't hold so many things. He had only taken a few steps when they fell to the ground. He thought for a moment and pushed the picture scroll in Xian's direction. He picked up the little sword and the red sandalwood box and continued to walk forward. Halfway through, he casually threw the box aside and picked up a green jade seal. Then, he held the little sword in one hand and the seal in the other and walked towards Yili's direction. Congratulations to the little heir for your unparalleled martial arts in the future. You'll be able to command thousands of troops and horses. As it turned out, the last seal that Lin picked up was a military commander's seal. Lin threw himself into Yili's arms and handed the commander's seal to Yili. Mother, Lin is good. Yili smiled as she hugged her son. She lowered her head and kissed his little head. She smiled and said, "And Lin is good." Xian, who was still sitting on the table, pursed her lips when she saw that her brother had left. He calmly glanced at the surrounding crowd and slowly began to move as well. Although she was the older sister, her steps were not as steady as Lin's. After a few steps, she stopped and continued to crawl around the table. When she saw something that she liked, she would pull it towards the place where she had been sitting. Soon, there was a large pile of things around her. Weapons and toys that boys liked, jewelry that girls liked, jewelry, books, brushes, and ink that one could think of. When she felt that it was enough, she sat there and didn't move anymore. Yili didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xian, choose something that you like and bring it over. Xian looked at Yili and hesitated for a moment. She lowered her head and looked at the pile of things in front of her. Her big, bright eyes turned, and she crawled towards the table. Everyone was afraid that she would fall, and quickly went forward. Xian grabbed the sleeve of Su Qingyan, who was closest to her, and crawled back. She brought Su Qingyan to her pile of things and then stared at him with wide eyes. Su Qingyan was speechless. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he could only rub his nose helplessly and ask Xian, "Do you want Uncle to help you carry it?" Xian giggled. Su Qingyan could only ask, "Which one do you want?" Xian began to push the things one by one towards Su Qingyan. Su Qingchen looked helplessly at Yili and Immerse, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Sisterly, your little princess is really greedy." The people nearby also found the little princess's actions very amusing. Mo Jingyu smiled and said, "It seems that the little princess has a wide range of interests. In the future, she will definitely be rich and won't have to worry about anything." Everyone also congratulated Prince Ding and Princess Consort for their good fortune. In the end, only Su Qingyan was forced to help the little princess put away all the things. Because if he didn't put them away, the little princess would lie on a pair of small things and refuse to move. The pregnancy catching ceremony was actually very simple. After the two babies were caught, they were carried down. The guests who had come to watch the ceremony were invited to the garden to enjoy the scenery, drink wine, and chat, while waiting for the evening banquet. The people of the Prince Ding mansion gathered in the reception pavilion. The two babies were still holding their spoils of war and playing happily in the arms of the adults. Su Qingyan had an amused expression as he held Xian. On the table beside him were Xian's spoils of war. Xian was holding an exquisite and gorgeous jewelry box in her hands and studying it attentively. "Xiao Bao hasn't returned yet?" Yili asked with a frown. Su Qingfeng frowned and said, "Not yet. Jirue, Junhan, and Qin Lai are also not in the mansion.
But they should be fine.
If something really happened, the people following them will come back to report." Yili looked at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and nodded, saying, "Don't worry, Li Xiaobao and the others will be fine." Yili nodded and looked at Qin Lai, asking, "How is the Queen of Nanzhao?" Qin Feng frowned and said, although Princess Anxi has disguised herself, it's not to the extent that we can't recognize her. She is being led around the city. Mo Jingli probably doesn't want to do anything to Princess Anxi. He just wants to use Princess Anxi to divert our attention. Yili pondered for a moment and said, look for an opportunity. No matter what, we should save Princess Anxi first. Princess, something bad has happened. Outside the door, Director Mo hurried in to report. What happened? Mo Xiuyao asked calmly. Chief Steward Mo said in a deep voice, Prince Pu heard about Princess Anxi from somewhere and rushed out with his men to save Princess Anxi. Chapter 1083. Nonsense. Yili frowned. Since the other party dared to strut around the city with Princess Anxi, they would not be unprepared. It was too risky for Pu to rush out like this. After some thought, Yili said, Zhuojing, take some people and go. No, Li will go ourselves. Mo Xiuyao stood up and took Yili's hand as he spoke softly. Yili frowned slightly. The Prince Ding mansion was currently filled with guests. They needed Prince Ding to oversee things. Moreover, this matter was not serious enough to require Prince Ding and the princess to personally attend to it. Mo Xiuyao smiled and said, let's go. Pu and Princess Anxi are guests. Let's go take a look. Yili sighed helplessly and said, if you say so, then let's go. Third brother. Su Qingfeng smiled and said, don't worry, Lier. Leave the Prince Ding mansion to us. On an inconspicuous street in Glass City. Because it was a special day, Glass City was especially lively. However, some of the more remote streets were even more deserted than usual. By the time Yili and Mo Xiuyao arrived, the Nanzhao guards that Pu had brought had already started fighting with Mo Jingli's men. Although Mo Jingli did not have many men, each one of them was skilled. The worst thing was that Pu's guards had forced them into a restaurant on the street. They had smashed all the wine in the restaurant. If anyone dared to step into the restaurant, they would immediately set it on fire and perish together with Princess Anxi. Seeing Yili and Mo Xiuyao arrive, Pu quickly went up to them and anxiously explained the situation. Prince Ding, Princess Ding. Yili didn't look too good either. The current situation wasn't that they couldn't beat these people, but that they were holding back. These people dared to do this because they were prepared to die. As long as they dared to act rashly, these people would ignite their fire seeds, and the entire restaurant, which was almost soaked in strong liquor, would be turned into a sea of fire. If Princess Anxi was hurt, it would be self-defeating and the losses would outweigh the gains. Pu also knew that he was being impulsive, but his wife and son had been missing for so many days. This man, who was not good at patience, had already reached his limit. When he heard about Princess Anxi, how could he hold himself back? Looking at Pu's guilty and vexed expression, Yili sighed softly in her heart. She calmly comforted him. Don't worry, Wang Fu. The Queen of Nanzhao is blessed. Nothing will happen. Pu nodded and said, sorry to trouble you, princess. Please save Anxi. Don't worry, Prince Ding Mansion. This is Glass City. The Prince Ding Mansion will do its best to protect the queen. Yili gave Qin Feng a look. Qin Feng nodded and stepped forward, saying in a clear voice, everyone inside, listen up. Prince Ding and Princess Ding have personally arrived. Release the Queen of Nanzhao, and we can spare your lives. There was a moment of silence inside. A figure appeared at the window on the second floor. He looked down at the people below and said, we can release Princess Anxi first. Let Prince Ding and Princess Ding come in personally. Impudent. Qin Feng said sternly. How dare you? Do you really think that the Prince Ding mansion can't do anything to you? These people obviously knew that they were going to die at this point. Perhaps it was because they had nothing left to lose, but they were bolder. They smiled and said, we naturally have a way. As long as Prince Ding gives the order to shoot, we can all be killed without a single soldier. No matter, having a queen die with them, it's still worth it. Mo Xiuyao was about to speak when Yili raised her hand to stop him. She stepped forward and said with a smile, if I really agree to come up with Prince Ding, would you dare? The other party was silent. Prince Ding's martial arts were unparalleled. This was something everyone in the world knew. If they really allowed Prince Ding to go up, they really couldn't be sure what would happen. After a moment, the man sneered and said, "Thank you for your reminder, Princess. Then it's fine as long as Princess comes up alone." Although it was rumored that Princess Ding's martial arts were not bad, it was far from the level where ordinary martial arts masters would be afraid of her. They were all first- and second-rate experts. It was naturally not a problem for them to deal with Ding Wangfei.
Okay.
Yi Li smiled. Mo Xiuyao frowned in displeasure. Even though he knew that Yi Li had a plan, Mo Xiuyao was not happy to see Yi Li take any risks in front of him. Not even for the Queen of Nanzhao. Even if the Queen and Prince of Nanzhao died in Li City, so what? Even if Nanzhao and the Prince Ding mansion became enemies, they could not do anything to them. Yi Li gently gripped his hand and said with a comforting smile, "Don't worry, nothing will happen." Mo Xiuyao pursed his lips and looked at her in displeasure. Yi Li said with a slight smile, "I promise to come out in 15 minutes. After a moment, Mo Xiuyao let go and watched as Yi Li walked into the restaurant. Entering the restaurant, the thick smell of wine hit them in the face. The hall was littered with broken wine jars, and the floor was soaked with wine. Yi Li strolled up to the second floor and saw a few men staring at her covetously. Princess Anqi sat at a table and looked at her without moving. Her eyes were filled with anxiety. "Princess Ding, don't come over." Mo Jingli took Shua away.
Please save Shua.
Yi Li smiled and said, "Princess Anqi, don't worry. Shua will be fine." Thinking of her son that Mo Jingli had taken away, Princess Anqi's eyes reddened. "Princess Ding, don't worry about me. As long as Shua is fine." Yi Li sighed. This time, the Queen and the Prince had suffered an undeserved calamity because of Ding Wangfu. How can this consort not care? Sitting at a table not far from Princess Anqi, Yi Li calmly looked at the men in front of her. They looked familiar, but she couldn't remember their names. They should be Mo Xiuyao's guards. She might have met them before. Gentlemen, Mo Jingli's methods are becoming more and more shameless. Using a woman and an innocent baby as hostages. The man in the lead took a step forward and sized Yi Li up. At this point, who cares if you're presentable or not? Princess Ding dared to risk her life for someone unrelated to her. We admire her. Unfortunately, we are on opposing sides. Please forgive us. Yi Li looked at him with interest and said with a smile, "Your words are quite interesting. This consort is surprised that someone like you is still loyal to Mo Jingli." The man smiled bitterly and said, "A loyal subject will not serve two masters. Moreover, His Majesty has shown me kindness." "Kindness? You are a loyal person." Yi Li sighed. The man looked at Yi Li and said, "This consort is surprised that you would risk your life alone as the consort. If this consort lit a fire now, it would be more worth it to burn Princess Ding to death than to burn the Queen of Nanzhao. And now, I'm afraid that the consort will be buried with the Queen of Nanzhao." Yi Li looked at him leisurely and said with a smile, "First, are you sure that I won't be able to escape after you light the fire? Second, you took the Queen of Nanzhao to wander around the city for so long. After being surrounded, you put on such a show. Do you really want to kill Princess Anqi first? You know that you will die for sure. If you really want to kill Princess Anqi, why don't you just slit her throat? Then you might be able to fight your way out. Now, I don't know about Princess Anqi, but you all look like you have no way out. Why do you have to do this?" The man's eyes darkened. "What do you mean?" Yi Li covered her smile and said, "Don't you understand? I'm advising you to act quickly." The man looked at the woman in white in front of him suspiciously. She was willing to risk her life for Princess Anqi, but advised him to act quickly. This was definitely not what they had expected. However, he had been with Mo Xiuyao for a long time and had naturally heard about Princess Ding's cunning. Although he couldn't see through Yi Li's thoughts, he watched Yi Li's every move cautiously. Yi Li said with a smile, "You don't have to be so nervous. I know that you don't want to kill Princess Anqi at all. You even want her to live as long as possible." The man fell silent. Yili said with a smile, you want to use Princess Anshi to stall me and Prince. Does Mo Jingli have other plans in secret? Is he trying to lure us away? But does Mo Jingli really think that Prince and I will abandon everything and stay here for Princess Anshi? The man sneered. Princess, you're here now. Isn't that enough? Yili helplessly sighed and said, this imperial concubine came in to tell you that after a quarter of an hour, the secret guards of Prince Ding's residence will begin their assault. The man's face darkened. He said in a low voice, aren't you afraid that I'll kill the Queen of Nanzhao? Yili said, it's important whether she lives or dies. Isn't there an explanation? There are so many guests in the Prince Ding mansion today. How can Prince and I stay here for a long time? Seeing the man staring at her with a serious expression, Yili sat down leisurely. She looked at the furnishings in the restaurant and said casually, does Mo Jingli want to cooperate with Mo Jingyu? What do you think Mo Jingyu can do? Hearing this, the man's expression finally changed. Yili acted as if she didn't see it. She continued, there are also some old officials and nobles of Dechu State in Glass City who are secretly helping. Even so, what can they do? Every soldier in Glass City is in the hands of Prince Ding Mansion. Can they turn Glass City upside down? Princess Ding is indeed very powerful. The man stared at Yili and said in a low voice, Princess Ding didn't come here to gossip with us. What does Princess want? Yili said with a smile, release Princess Anshi, and I will consider letting bygones be bygones. The man's lips curled into a mocking smile. Obviously, he didn't believe Yili's words at all. Even if he did, he wouldn't consider it. Yili didn't care. She pondered for a moment and said, the first option is to wait with you for an hour. Release Princess Anshi, and I will let you go. The second option, after a quarter of an hour, we will attack the Prince Ding mansion. You're afraid Princess Anshi will die? Yili looked at Princess Anshi and said apologetically, Princess Anshi, don't worry. I swear on the reputation of the Prince Ding mansion that I will save the little prince. Princess Anshi obviously understood Yili's meaning. She said with a smile, Princess, you can go now. Let the Prince Ding mansion's people attack immediately. Waiting a quarter of an hour or half an hour won't make any difference. Yili nodded firmly at Princess Anshi and said, okay. Chapter 1084. After hearing Princess Anshi's answer, Yili stood up and prepared to go downstairs. It was as if she didn't care about Princess Anshi's life at all. This kind of reaction made the few men present stunned. After all, they knew that Prince Ding was cold and heartless, but Princess Ding was very easygoing. It was impossible for her to abandon Princess Anshi. Wait, the man said in a low voice. One of the men guarding the stairs heard his leader's voice and immediately reached out to stop Yili. However, Yili's expression darkened. She raised her hand and grabbed the man's arm. With a twist of her hand, the man who was blocking her path was pushed to the ground with a muffled groan. Yili turned around and looked coldly at the man in black. I respect your loyalty, but it's best that you stop before going too far.
Wait.
The man in black said, we can let Princess Anshi go, but why should I believe that you won't do anything in an hour? Yili raised her eyebrows and asked, what do you want? The man in black said, Princess Ding and Prince, please wait here for an hour. After an hour, we'll let Princess Anshi go. In addition, during this hour, you can't see anyone in the Prince Ding mansion. Yili lowered her eyes and thought for a moment, then nodded. Okay. Let me take Princess Anshi away first. We'll wait outside. The man in black frowned and wanted to refuse. Yili said indifferently, you're right. If His Highness and I spend an hour with you, but you burn Princess Anshi in the end, who am I supposed to complain to? The man hesitated for a long time. Yili looked at his hesitant face, then shook her head and turned to leave. Princess Ding, come out if you agree. If you don't, stay here. If I don't come out in 15 minutes, Prince Ding will come in personally. She watched as Yili's figure leisurely disappeared at the top of the stairs. The people upstairs looked at each other. Boss, what should we do? The leading man in black pondered for a long time before finally sighing and saying, let's go out. But What if? What if Princess Ding was lying? They could still hold on to this house that was filled with strong liquor to prevent them from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases. Once they vented their anger, the Mahist army lying in ambush outside would be enough to turn them into hedgehogs. The black-robed man smiled bitterly and helplessly. Princess Ding had already arrived just now. We had already lost by not killing her immediately. Furthermore, Princess Ding was right. How much did the life and death of the Queen of Nanzhao have to do with the Prince Ding mansion? Even if Nanzhao wants to become enemies with the Prince Ding mansion because of this, if they want to cause trouble for the Prince Ding mansion, they have to go through the West Hill and did Chu State first. Moreover, he doubted which country would dare to cause trouble for the Prince Ding mansion. Are we just going to go out like this? The black-robed man gritted his teeth and said, Let's gamble that Princess Ding will keep her promise. She will die anyway. If she can delay for an hour for His Majesty, she will be loyal. The others were silent. No matter if it was loyalty or other reasons, they had no way out now that they had come this far. The boss was right. They could not avoid death, no matter what. Compared to being burned to death, they would rather die with an arrow through the heart. Outside the restaurant, Yili stood beside Mo Xiuyao. Puo stood behind them and looked inside nervously. After a while, they finally saw Princess Anxi being escorted out of the restaurant slowly. Anxi. Puo called out anxiously. Princess Anxi shook her head to show that she was fine. Mo Xiuyao glanced at the crowd and said, Since they are already out, let her go. The men looked at Mo Xiuyao warily and did not move. Mo Xiuyao snorted disdainfully and said, The princess consort has already told I. If I wanted to break the contract, you would be dead the moment you stepped out. Let her go. The black-robed man holding Princess Anxi down paused for a moment, then finally let go of Princess Anxi's hand. As soon as she was free, Princess Anxi rushed over. Puo hugged Princess Anxi excitedly. Anxi, are you okay? I'm fine, Princess Anxi said emotionally. But our child, Shua is with Mo Jingli. His wife's safe return calmed Puo down. Although he was also worried about his son's disappearance, he looked at Mo Xiuyao and Yili with more respect and confidence. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Shua will be fine. On the side, Mo Xiuyao pulled Yili to a chair that the guards of the Prince Ding mansion had brought over from somewhere. It was rare that Mo Xiuyao would keep his promise to the enemy. He sat under the faint sunlight and waited for an hour to pass. The black-robed man looked at the white-haired Prince Ding leaning against Princess Ding with his eyes closed. A complicated expression flashed across his face. There was awe, helplessness, regret, and information. In fact, when he decided to go out, he could not be sure that Prince Ding would keep his promise. It was already very good that he was able to resolve the situation like this. At the same time, it also showed the difference between Prince Ding and Prince Li. He knew that if his master Mo Jingli was in this situation, Mo Jingli would never keep his promise. Princess Consort, a shadow guard hurried over and said in a low voice, Young Master Qingchen has sent someone to ask the prince to return to their residence immediately. Mo Xiuyao opened his eyes and said calmly, What is it? The shadow guard hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, The little heir has not been found yet. Mo Xiuyao sat up and glanced at the group of black-robed men standing not far away and looking at them warily. He looked down calmly and said, I know. Let young Master Qingchen do as he sees fit. This, after all, something had happened to the little heir, but the prince was not moved at all. This made the shadow guard a little worried. But when he met Mo Xiuyao's calm eyes, the shadow guard's heart trembled. He quickly said, This subordinate understands. This subordinate will take his leave. Hearing that Mo Xiaobao had not been found, Yili frowned slightly. She lowered her head and looked at Mo Xiuyao's hand that was holding hers. It was dry and steady. She couldn't help but relax. She slowly leaned back in her chair and accompanied Mo Xiuyao as they waited for the time to come. An hour passed by. Some people felt like time had passed by, while others felt like a year had passed. When the time finally came to an end, Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li and slowly stood up. Big brother Ping Jing looked at the man in black in front of him and said, "I will spare your life. Go back and tell Mo Jingli. Don't forget, his son is still in Ai's hands." With that, Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li and left without looking back. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao's departing figure, the man in black let out a long sigh. When they were face to face, the pressure that Prince Ding gave off was absolutely unbearable. He raised his hand and wiped his forehead. The sweat on his forehead had already soaked half of his hair. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sound of arrows piercing through the air rang out. The man in black vigilantly jumped to the side. The moment he landed, an arrow nailed him to the back of his foot. When he turned back, the men who had been following him had all fallen to the ground. Not far away, a man in black holding a bow and arrow sat on the roof. He said calmly, "Don't be afraid. Prince said to spare your life. We won't shoot at you." Chapter 1085. Seeing that person quickly disappear behind the eaves, the black-clothed man only felt his entire body turn cold. After a long while, he turned and madly ran towards the intersection. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li returned to the palace. Su Qingchen was anxiously waiting in the study. "Big brother." Su Qingchen's handsome face was gloomy. He said unhappily, "Why are you only back now?" Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "What happens?" Su Qingchen picked up a letter from the table and handed it over, saying, "Xiaobao has fallen into Mo Jingli's hands." Mo Jingli had someone deliver this letter. Yi Li took the letter and looked. It was indeed Mo Jingli's handwriting. Between the lines, there was malice and smugness. Su Qingchen sat down, looked at them unhappily and asked, "What happened?" So many people were watching Xiaobao. How could he still fall into Mo Jingli's hands? Mo Xiaoyao looked at the letter Yi Li handed over and said calmly, "Don't worry, Xiaobao will be fine." Su Qingchen looked at Mo Xiaoyao for a long time, then snorted, "You set this up again? Be careful that you don't fall for your own cleverness." Mo Xiaoyao smiled helplessly. "This wasn't set up by me." Mo Xiaoyao looked anxiously at Yi Li. "Why do I feel so resentful?" Su Qingchen frowned slightly. Mo Xiaobao. Mo Xiaoyao blinked innocently. "So, it really had nothing to do with I." Su Qingchen looked at Mo Xiaoyao and sneered, "Just let him do as he pleases. If something happens, brother Qingchen," Mo Xiaoyao said with a faint smile, "Xiaobao will be 11 soon. He's not a child anymore. If we don't let him do as he pleases, we will never be at ease. Besides, with someone watching him, nothing will happen. If something really happened, there's no way the people around him wouldn't have come back to report." Su Qingchen shook her head helplessly. She sighed and said, "Forget it. Even you, the father, aren't worried. Why should I be? Big brother is naturally doing this for Xiaobao's sake." Yi Li smiled faintly and frowned slightly. "I'm also a little worried about little treasure. This pair, father and son, they're really father and son. Usually, they didn't find each other pleasing to the eye, but when it came to serious matters, they would have a kindred spirit that made people hate them." Prince Ding rubbed his nose innocently as his wife vented her anger on him. He decided to record this debt on a certain daring brat.
Achoo.
Somewhere in a dark corner, a little ghost dressed in an inconspicuous cloth sneezed lightly. Someone immediately covered his nose and whispered, "What are you doing?" In the dim light, a pair of bright eyes appeared. Sorry. I think I caught a cold. It doesn't matter if you're unlucky, but don't drag Qin Lai down." Su Zhiwei, who was also dressed in cloth, said in a low voice. Mo Xiaobao pouted in grievance. "I could have gone myself. Why did Qin Lai have to go first?" "Shut up." Su Zhiwei rolled his eyes impatiently. "Don't you know that a gentleman doesn't stand on a collapsing wall? Do you want to be cursed by Uncle Prince Ding when you go back?" Mo Xiaobao blinked and looked at Su Zhiwei. "Cousin Zhiwei, you're being irritable." Su Zhiwei shot him a glare. He really was crazy to accompany Mo Xiaobao to do such a dangerous thing. Did this madman know how old they were? If Qin Lai hadn't gone first, Mo Xiaobao would have walked right into the trap and sent himself into the hands of a madman. Mo Xiaobao felt wronged. It was clearly Qin Lai who was too anxious. We already decided to change the plan, but he didn't even discuss it before running away. We still have to work so hard to save him. Su Zhiwei silently glanced at Mo Xiaobao. After a while, he said, "When Aunt gave birth to you, why didn't she just strangle you to death?" Mo Xiaobao was the type of person who forgets favors and violates justice. Who did Qin Lai take the risk for? Mo Xiaobao laughed very smugly. He rubbed his nose and said, "Mother loves me the most.
She can't bear to."
Su Zhiwei snorted and ignored him. When you go back and get tortured by Prince Ding's uncle, there will definitely be no one who will pity you. The Su family's little young master silently cursed in his heart. But little young Master Su didn't know that there was a kind of person in this world that was like a cockroach that couldn't be killed. The more they were tortured, the more they would be tortured. Su Zhiwei, who was completely oblivious to the fact that beside him was a little pervert in the midst of evolving, carefully crawled up, following the dense vines as he slowly moved forward. Right now, the most important matter for them was to find the captured Qin Lai and not to bicker with the heartless Mo Xiaobao here. Mo Xiaobao, who was following behind him, rolled his eyes at the sky. Did Su Zhiwei know that he was the older brother? Although Su Zhiwei and Mo Xiaobao were still young, Mo Xiaobao was doted on by the Su family and Prince Ding mansion since he was young. However, he didn't forget what he should learn. And Su Zhiwei, as Mo Xiaobao's only younger cousin, naturally accompanied Mo Xiaobao to suffer. Therefore, little friend Su Zhiwei became the second person in the Su family to learn martial arts after Su Qingfeng. Although the two were young, they had the advantage of being taught by famous experts. Even if they couldn't beat them, normal people couldn't catch up. After a long time, the two finally moved to the entrance of the courtyard. Mo Xiaobao looked at the mark left behind by Qin Lai and asked with some confusion, "This isn't the Dechu State's post house. Where the hell is this place?" Su Zhiwei rolled his eyes in annoyance and said, "It seems to be the Zhao family's backyard." Zhao family? It's the Zhao family that fifth uncle said wanted to marry his daughter to Prince Ding's uncle, Zhao Zhifeng. The one that even brought a group of people to Lishan Academy to find great-grandfather.
Su Zhiwei said.
Mo Xiaobao's eyes turned and finally revealed a strange smile. So it's him. Don't think that Mo Xiaobao only knew how to be mischievous every day. He didn't miss a single thing. At least, Mo Xiaobao clearly remembered who wanted to steal his mother's man. Although he didn't like his annoying father, he didn't have any thoughts of changing him. Even if he did, it would depend on his mother. If his mother didn't say she didn't want him, he would kill whoever dared to steal him.
What do you want now?
We're here to save Qin Lai, Su Zhiwei said cautiously. Mo Xiaobao looked at the sky, who said, "We're here to save Qin Lai? If we want to save Qin Lai, wouldn't it be more convenient to let the Shadow Guard and Qilin come to save him? If Qin Lai is injured, which one of us can bring him out?" Even if the two of them weren't much weaker than adults, they were still children in the end. If Qin Lai couldn't move, neither of them would be able to carry him back. "I keep feeling like I'll be killed by you," Su Zhiwei muttered in a low voice. Mo Xiaobao smiled like a cat that had stolen a fish. "Cousin Zhiwei, don't worry. Cousin will protect you. After we go in, you go and see if Qin Lai and the little emperor are together. I'll go and see if the Zhao family has any secrets. I've seen that Zhao Zhifeng before. With his guts, he definitely wouldn't dare to betray my father." When Mo Xiaoyao wanted to torture someone, it wasn't something that a normal person could think of. If Zhao Zhifeng was alone, even if he was given 100 guts, he wouldn't dare to betray the Prince Ding mansion in Glass City. If it wasn't for the fact that someone had something on him that he couldn't do, or that he had absolute confidence that he could escape. Su Zhiwei hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Be careful." Seeing Su Zhiwei leave like a cat, Mo Xiaobao stood up and made a hand signal to the shadow guard hidden in the dark. He said in a low voice, "Protect Zhiwei." Feeling someone leave in the dark, he followed Su Zhiwei, who had already left. Mo Xiaobao then jumped onto the wall with a smile and disappeared behind it. In the dark, he asked in a low voice, The heir went in. What do we do?
Don't worry.
The prince said that as long as the heir's life isn't in danger, we don't need to worry about him. Another person answered, All right, let's go in too. I hope the security inside isn't too tight. If they wanted to protect the heir, they had to follow him at all times. However, it was much more difficult to follow him in secret once he entered the courtyard. After a moment, the place where they spoke returned to silence. In a dark study in a hidden corner of the Zhao mansion, the head of the Zhao family, Zhao Zhifeng, was sitting behind a desk with a gloomy expression. No one knew what he was writing. Just as he was lost in thought, a servant outside the door reported in a low voice, Master, Lord Li, Lord Zhu, and Lord Wang are here. Let them in. Zhao Zhifeng suddenly stood up and said. Not long after, the door to the study was opened, and a few middle-aged men filed in. The person in the lead smiled as he walked in. Brother Zhao, why did you call us here at this time today? Zhao Zhifeng looked at them and said, I want you to meet someone. Who is it that makes Brother Zhao so cautious? Today is the birthday banquet of the heir and princess of the Prince Ding mansion. Although we don't stand out, it wouldn't be good if we don't show up. When he said the words, don't stand out, the man's tone was full of mockery. Zhao Zhifeng didn't say anything. He just turned and walked in. The other three looked at each other and followed after him. When they entered the study, they saw two children who looked about 10 years old lying on a soft couch in a compartment that was specially partitioned for people to rest. One of them asked curiously, Brother Zhao, this is the little emperor of the De Chu state? It wasn't that he was familiar with Immerse Suiyun, but the dragon robe that Immerse Suiyun was wearing made it obvious. Zhao Zhifeng pulled out a stiff smile and said, Look at the other child. The three of them looked at the child in embroidered clothes lying beside Immerse Suiyun and couldn't help but exclaim, The heir? Chapter 1086. Seeing the unconscious boy in embroidered clothes on the soft couch, everyone was shocked. They stared at Zhao Zhifeng, who was standing to the side in horror. One of them took a step forward in agitation and said, Are you crazy? How dare you kidnap the Prince Ding mansion's heir in Glass City? Just thinking about the blood on Prince Ding's hands all these years made them shudder. The Prince Ding mansion still had the Shadow Guard and Qi Lin that were everywhere. If Prince Ding knew about this, not only them, but even their entire families and pets would not be able to escape death. Zhao Zhifeng smiled helplessly and said, How could I have the ability to kidnap the Prince Ding mansion's heir? Then what is going on? Everyone looked at Zhao Zhifeng with a serious expression. Zhao Zhifeng sighed and said, I don't need to guess who took care of you these days, right? Hearing his words, the three people's expressions changed. Zhao Zhifeng continued, He already told me. That's why I asked you to come here. The news of the Prince Ding mansion's heir's disappearance will not be hidden for long. When the time comes, the Prince Ding mansion's guards and Mahist army will probably search every house. When that time comes, I'm afraid it won't be hidden anymore. The three people's expressions were ugly. They stared at Zhao Zhifeng and said, Why did you ask us to come here for this matters? They were originally influential families in De Chu State, but after they joined the Prince Ding mansion, they were not valued at all. This time, Prince Ding wantonly appointed officials, but he obviously excluded most of the aristocratic families. After that, the aristocratic families fought over the empty position of left prime minister. In the end, Prince Ding gave the position of left prime minister to an outsider, Chen Xiufu. At that time, they already understood that Prince Ding did not need them. Following Prince Ding, these aristocratic families that had been passed down for generations were destined to decline. Therefore, when Mo Jingli came to find them, they were quickly moved. Not only because of the benefits and future that Mo Jingli promised them, but also because they had to fight for it. Zhao Zhifeng's old face squeezed out a cold smile and said, Do you think that if Prince Ding finds out about this, you can escape? Right now, the Prince Ding mansion is looking for that person everywhere. If he is caught, do you think he will expose us? Hearing this, everyone could not help but break out in a cold sweat. She secretly regretted agreeing to Mo Jingli's request. She was too impulsive. Perhaps they had been angered by the cold treatment from Ding Wangfu and the loss of the left prime minister's position. Would there really be a future for them if they followed Mo Jingli? But now that things had come to this, they had no choice but to turn back. Putting aside the fact that Prince Ding would never tolerate betrayers, just the fact that Mo Jingli had something on them, there was no way for them to turn back. Then what do you plan to do? Zhao Zhifeng lowered his eyebrows and thought for a long time. He shook his head and said, "The little heir still has a great use. He can't be moved, but it's not safe in my mansion." Everyone looked at each other and nodded. The Zhao mansion did not have any secret places to hide people. If they left the little heir here, it would not be safe for a long time. Then what should we do? Zhao Zhifeng thought for a moment and said, "We must find a secret place to hide the little heir. Then what about the little emperor? With that person's temperament, I'm afraid he won't keep him." "Why don't?" "Not yet. If the little emperor does not attend the banquet tonight, it will arouse the suspicion of the Prince Ding mansion." Zhao Zhifeng shook his head. Reporting to Master, King Yu of Dechu State requests an audience. Outside the door, a guard reported in a low voice. Under the eaves outside the door, Mo Xiaobao sat on the carved beam under the eaves. He bent over the window and eavesdropped on the plan inside. A big smile appeared on his delicate little face. After a while, a few people walked out of the study in a single file. Before leaving, Zhao Zhifeng instructed the guard at the door to keep an eye on the people inside. He then left with the other three. Today, everyone with a little bit of face in Glass City was gathered in the Prince Ding mansion. If they did not appear, it would be even more suspicious. Seeing Zhao Zhifeng and the others leave, Mo Xiaobao silently descended from the eaves. He looked at the two people guarding the door and frowned. His eyes quickly turned, and he took out a small and exquisite object from his sleeve. He pressed it lightly against one of the people. With a slight whoosh, one of the people at the door fell to the ground. The other person was shocked. Just as he was about to call for help, his vision turned black, and he also fell to the ground. Su Zhiwei stood behind the pillar with a cold expression and glared at Mo Xiaobao. Mo Xiaobao chuckled at him and pulled him into the study. Outside, two shadow guards dressed in black silently landed in the courtyard. They looked at the guards lying on the ground and smiled at each other. After a while, the two guards were moved to a secret place. Two inconspicuous men dressed in guard uniforms appeared at the door of the study. The prince is in such a good mood. He still has time to train the little heir at a time like this. I think the prince won't even bother to make a move at this level of difficulty. The little heir is quite daring. He just forgot to clean up the mess. If someone suddenly came and saw the two people lying at the door, wouldn't they be exposed? Therefore, as shadow guards, they had to clean up the mess for their masters at any time. With the little heir and young Master Su's stature, they won't be able to handle such a big thing. The two of them looked at each other and couldn't help but have a thought. The little heir swaggered in so confidently. Was he certain that they would help him clean up? In the study, Mo Xiaobao danced with joy as he happily looked around. After a while, he found many interesting things. The Zhao family hadn't moved in for long, so naturally, there weren't many secret places. Moreover, even if there were any hidden mechanisms, it wouldn't be able to escape the eyes of a certain someone who had been clever and learned all sorts of things since young. Su Zhiwei sat on the soft couch and watched a certain someone rummage through the cabinets while frowning at the two people lying on the couch. Many times, Su Zhiwei really didn't know how his cousin, who had only beaten him when he was less than 2 years old, grew up to be like this. His aunt was clearly gentle and elegant, and Prince Ding's uncle was also extraordinary and had the air of a king. However, his cousin grew up to be neither. Other than that pretty face that could still be seen, there wasn't a single moment of rest. "Are you here to see the two of them?" Su Zhiwei asked unhappily. Mo Xiaobao raised his head and glanced at him. He casually threw over a small porcelain bottle and said, "What's there to see? They were drugged. Just smell it and they'll wake up. This is from Sister Yunj. It can cure all the sleeping incense." After speaking, He continued to flip through the letters and booklets that he took out from one of Zhao Zhifang's locked cabinets, without raising his head. Su Jirue wordlessly placed the medicine bottle under Qin Lai and Mo Suiyun's noses for them to smell. As expected, Qin Lai was the first to wake up in a short while. He wasn't surprised to see Su Jirue and sat up silently. After a while, Mo Suiyun also woke up. However, he wasn't as calm as Qin Lai and almost cried out. However, Qin Lai and Su Jirue both covered his mouth. Chapter 1087. Mo Xiaobao stood up from the bookcase and stuffed a thin booklet into his arms. Obviously, he had found what he was looking for. Waving his hand, he said, "Don't be afraid. It's our people outside." Mo Suiyun looked at Mo Xiaobao, who was dressed in plain clothes, and then looked at Qin Lai, who looked exactly like Mo Xiaobao and was dressed in black brocade clothes and looked more like Ding Wangfu's heir than Mo Xiaobao. He was speechless. Mo Xiaobao didn't care about Mo Suiyun's shock at all. He smiled and put his hand on Mo Suiyun's shoulder. "Good brother, thank you very much." No matter how stupid Mo Suiyun was, he knew that he was being used. He angrily pushed away Mo Xiaobao's hand, pointed at Qin Lai and asked, "Who is he?" Mo Xiaobao smiled and said, "This is not important. Don't they look alike? Like twin brothers? This isn't easy to do." Mo Suiyun looked at Qin Lai for a long time before saying, "Such a perfect disguise. No wonder Uncle Prince Ding could fool Genom of Gojoseon and King Li." Mo Xiaobao smiled and pulled Qin Lai's face. "This is especially hard to do. Normal people can't learn it. I don't know it either." Qin Lai raised his hand and slapped away Mo Xiaobao's hand that was messing around on his face. "He's shorter than you." Mo Suiyun looked carefully for a long time before saying, "He's Qin Lai." When the word short was mentioned, the aura around Qin Lai's body immediately turned cold. Although his face couldn't be seen because of his disguise, just by looking at the cold light in his eyes, one could tell that this was Qin Lai's sore spot. In terms of age, Qin Lai was the oldest among them, but in terms of height, he was only about the same height as Su Jirue. Su Jirue wasn't even 10 years old yet. Not being tall was every man's pain. Boys were the same too. Seeing that Qin Lai was about to explode, Mo Xiaobao hurriedly pressed him down and smiled. "Don't be angry, don't be angry. Little Emperor, it was a slip of the tongue. We can't afford to pay for it. Mr. Shen also said that you started martial arts too early and matured late. After 16, you'll start to grow." Being comforted by a little brat who was several years younger than him, Qin Lai didn't feel comforted at all. Su Jirue stood by the side and looked at them with his arms crossed. He said unhappily, "Are you leaving or not? Do you think this is your home?" Mo Xiaobao smiled and said, "Go you and Qin Lai go. I will stay with the little emperor." "Nonsense." Su Jirue glared at him coldly. He had the demeanor of the second son of the Su family. Mo Xiaobao's face drooped. "Brother Jirue, if we leave now, how are we going to play when Zhao Zhifang comes back and finds out?" Su Jirue said, "Didn't you find something? Go back and hand it over to Uncle Prince Ding's husband, and he can come here directly to arrest them. What's there to catch? I don't know which rat hole Mo Jingli is hiding in. If I run away, he definitely won't come out. Otherwise, who knows what kind of destruction he'll cause. If he gets angry and kills people in Glass City, what will happen to Xian and Lin Er's first birthday banquet? Also, Royal Father said that we have to put on a good show tonight to scare those old men who don't know the severity of the situation. If the show is lost, I will die a horrible death." Mo Xiaobao said righteously. Su Jirue rolled his eyes. "Then, what do you want?" Mo Xiaobao took out the book and stuffed it into Su Jirue's arms. "You go back with Qin Lai first and give this to my royal father and mother. I will stay here and see how powerful this Mo Jingli is." Mo Suiyun didn't agree. "If you want to stay, then stay. I don't want to stay here and risk my life with you." Mo Xiaobao looked at Mo Suiyun with a fake smile. "Brother, you are wrong. We are clearly on the same boat. How can you run away before leaving? Emo Suayan said, I only agreed to cooperate with you to bring you here, but I didn't agree to accompany you to catch Emo Jingli. Emo Xiaobao's delicate little face instantly turned sinister. He grabbed Emo Suayan's collar and shook it hard. Humph. You want to leave after boarding this prince's pirate ship? Do you want to do it or not? Do you want to do it or not? If you don't want to do it, do you believe that I will shout loudly and tell Mo Jingli that you are working with me to trick him? Emo Suayun waved his hand away in exasperation.
You lunatic.
You don't want to live anymore. Emo Xiaobao stared at him with a slightly wretched smile. If Emo Jingli really comes, I might be able to escape with my life. But it's hard to say for you. I understand. Emo Suayun gritted his teeth and glared at Emo Xiaobao. Emo Xiaobao nodded in satisfaction. That's a good boy. Stay here obediently and accompany me. I can guarantee your safety. How does the saying go? For a brother, you are willing to sacrifice yourself, right? Aren't we good brothers?
Pay. Who's your good brother?
If I'm your brother, I'll only be stabbed by you a few times. After settling Emo Suayun, Emo Xiaobao sat on the soft couch and waved his hand at Su Zhiwei and Qin Ran. All right, Qin Lai, come with me and change your clothes. Then you two can go back first. Qin Lai looked at him indifferently and said, I'll stay, you go back. Emo Xiaobao puffed up his little bun face and stared at the face that was exactly the same as his. I'm the prince. I have the final say. You secretly disguised yourself as this prince and ran out. This prince hasn't settled the score with you yet. Qin Lai looked at him indifferently and said, What is it that you can do, but I can't do? You don't have to stay here personally. Other than not being as wretched and vile as a certain person, he wasn't worse than Emo Xiaobao in any other aspect. He wasn't older than Emo Xiaobao for nothing.
No.
He still wanted to see that pervert Emo Jingli. Lord Father told him a very interesting thing. He wanted to verify it himself. Otherwise, it would be a pity. Qin Lai was too lazy to speak and casually pulled out the dagger that Su Zhiwei used to defend himself and pressed it against his neck. Go. Emo Xiaobao was stunned and wanted to say something, but Qin Lai pressed the dagger down a bit more, almost piercing his neck. Are you going or not? Emo Xiaobao was dumbfounded. For the first time in his life, he found that he was being threatened. Moreover, the person who threatened him was threatening him with his own life. How ridiculous. You're not even my wife. Emo Xiaobao cursed in his heart. But the one wearing shoes was afraid of the barefoot, and the barefoot was afraid of the one who didn't care for his life. Compared to Emo Xiaobao, who liked to play tricks on others, Qin Lai was the one who didn't care for his life. After being stunned for a moment, Emo Xiaobao was finally defeated. He could only unwillingly glare at Qin Lai and walk to Su Zhiwei's side. Seeing Emo Xiaobao defeated, Emo Suayun became happy instead. Jin finally knows why you're so crazy. Because you guys aren't normal people. Coming out of the study, Emo Xiaobao saw the two guards standing at the door and wasn't surprised at all. It's been hard on you guys. It's not hard, it's what this subordinate should do. One of the guards replied seriously. He silently said in his heart, Little Shitsi, the best consolation for us is that you don't cause too much trouble. Emo Xiaobao nodded his head and said, Protect the people inside. Zhiwei, let's go. Su Zhiwei speechlessly followed Emo Xiaobao. Even if the study is remote and people rarely come here, you don't have to be so carefree as if it's your own backyard. Chapter 1088. Tonight, the entire Prince Ding mansion was ablaze with lights. The main hall in the front yard of the Prince Ding mansion, which was used for entertaining guests, was also full of guests. Sitting at the head of the table were naturally Emo Xiuyao and Yi Li. On the right side were Mr. Qing Yun and the Su family. On the left side were Qin Xiufu, Su Qingchen, and the important civil and military officials of the Prince Ding mansion. Further down were the guests and envoys of various countries. Below, Emo Suayun and Emo Jingyu sat in the seats of the guests of Dechu State, but both of them looked a little absent-minded. Opposite them, in the seats of the West Hill envoys, an official behind Lei Tingfeng whispered in Lei Tingfeng's ear, I haven't seen the little heir of the Prince Ding mansion all day. Lei Tingfeng looked up and saw that the seat belonging to the little heir, Mo Yuchen, was still empty below Mo Xiaoyao and Yili. And he didn't seem to see Mo Yuchen when the two children were doing their homework at noon. Lei Tingfeng glanced at the calm Mo Xiaoyao and Yili, raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "We are guests, don't worry about these things." Lei Tingfeng didn't care, but it didn't mean that others didn't care. A man from the western region stood up and asked curiously, "Prince Ding, why don't I see the little prince of your mansion?" It was no wonder that these envoys were curious. The western region didn't have much contact with the central plains. Others had seen Mo Xiaobao once or twice, but these envoys had never seen Mo Xiaobao. Naturally, they were very curious about the future heir of the Prince Ding mansion. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "The heir is not feeling well and will come later." It was just a simple sentence, but everyone present could understand the meaning and thoughts behind it. Thus, some people's expressions changed slightly, some looked pensive, and some looked worried. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at the crowd below, and his gaze paused for a moment on Mo Jingyu and Mo Suiyun. Mo Jingyu and Mo Suiyun immediately felt a heavy pressure pressing down on them, as if it was real. Mo Suiyun's face paled, and he hurriedly lowered his head. The wine cup in Mo Jingyu's hand shook, and some fine wine spilled out onto his sleeves. Ignoring the gazes of the people around him, Mo Jingyu hurriedly put down his wine glass and clenched his fists tightly under the table. Mo Xiaoyao stood up, raised a glass of wine and smiled. "Today is the first birthday of my son, Yufeng, and my daughter, Yuya. Thank you all for coming from afar. I and the princess consort propose a toast to everyone." Beside Mo Xiaoyao, Yili also raised her wine cup and proposed a toast to the guests below. Everyone hurriedly stood up and said, "We should be the ones wishing the heir and princess a happy birthday." The guests and the host drank a cup, and the hall instantly became lively. Mo Xiaoyao waved his hand, and the maids wearing the Prince Ding mansion's uniform immediately came forward to pour wine for everyone. The sound of musical instruments faintly sounded in the hall, and beautiful dancers started to dance. The entire hall was bustling with noise and excitement. After a song and dance ended, the envoys from various countries came forward to present their congratulatory gifts. The gifts from the Prince Ding mansion's subordinates were naturally normal. Some were treasures that symbolized peace and joy, and there were also some interesting things among them. However, the gifts from the various countries were different. Not only did they flaunt their country's treasures, they also faintly had the intention of competing with other countries. The northern tribes had just fought an earth-shattering battle with the Prince Ding mansion and had suffered heavy casualties. However, they were also the country that was most anxious to repair their relationship with the Prince Ding mansion. Hence, the northern tribes were the first country to present gifts, and the gifts were not ordinary. The moment the two boxes were opened, the contents of the boxes shocked everyone present. In the cage on the left was a snow-white, flawless, and adorable blue-eyed fox. On the other side, in a box, there was indeed a huge green lotus flower. Although this lotus flower had been plucked, it was still in full bloom in a box carved from cold jade, as if it had just been plucked from a pond. Beside the lotus flower was a dark green lotus seed pod. The others were fine, but when Xinyang and Dr. Lin saw the items in the jade box, their eyes immediately lit up. Yelu Hong smiled and said, "These are the treasures of the northern tribes, the blue-eyed snow fox and the fiery lotus. We wish the little prince and princess a happy birthday." The crowd was in an uproar. Needless to say, the fiery lotus had a deep relationship with the Prince Ding mansion. There was even a time when Mo Xiaoyao's life depended on this lotus flower. However, after Yi Li found a replacement for the sky-falling flower, the idea of plucking the fiery lotus was never mentioned again. However, the fiery lotus was not as simple as an antidote to frost poison. If it was in the hands of a godly doctor like Xinyang, its effects would not be inferior to the sky-falling flower. As for the blue-eyed snow fox, it was known as the treasure of the northern tribes. Even in the northern tribes, it was rarely seen. It was said that it lived on the snowy peak of the western tribes, just like the fiery lotus. ordinary people would be lucky enough to be able to catch a glimpse of it. The fur of the blue-eyed snow fox was even more precious in the western regions. It was priceless. Not only was the blue-eyed snow fox smart and cute, its fur, flesh, and even blood were all treasures. The people in the Central Plains were fine, but many of the envoys from the western regions were envious of the little fox in the white jade cage. Yili smiled and nodded. "Thank you for the trouble, Crown Prince Yelu. Exion will definitely like the gift from your highness." Although Exion was still young, it was not suitable for her to get close to pets, but this blue-eyed snow fox was still young. In a few years, when Exion grew up, she would be a good companion. Yelu Hong smiled. "How could that be? On behalf of my royal father, this prince congratulates Prince Ding and Princess Consort. At the same time, this prince hopes that our two countries will be prosperous and peaceful." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. "This prince offers a toast to the crown prince." Yelu Hong nodded and raised his wine cup. "It should be me who proposes a toast to Prince Ding. Please." Everyone present knew that the Prince Ding mansion and the northern tribes had signed a peace treaty. Yelu Hong's declaration was just for the sake of the envoys present. It meant that the dispute between the Prince Ding mansion and the northern tribes would end here. After all, the northern tribes had been weakened by the Prince Ding mansion, and there were many small countries in the western regions that were eyeing them covetously. In this world, no one could easily live a peaceful life. Then, Lei Tingfeng and Mo Jingyu also came forward to present their gifts. They were all rare treasures. Although Princess Anxi and Pu had not found the little prince's whereabouts, they also presented their gifts appropriately. However, given the relationship between Princess Anxi and the Prince Ding mansion and the Su family, their gifts were naturally not as scheming as the others. They only gave a few precious specialties from Nanzhao. Later on, the envoys from the western regions presented even more strange gifts. Many of them were things that the people of the Central Plains had never seen before. It was an eye-opener for many people. Although Prince Ding had no intention of ascending the throne, it was already a grand occasion where people from all over the world came to congratulate him. In the midst of the singing and dancing, some of the guests suddenly groaned in pain while holding their abdomens. Soon, like a plague, more than half of the people in the hall had collapsed. After a while, the remaining half also collapsed. Everyone seemed to have been stripped of their bones, lying weakly on the ground, unable to move. Only Mo Xiaoyao, who was the most powerful among them, was still sitting steadily. However, his expression was not good. Chapter 1089. Prince Ding, what's going on? The envoys of the western regions clearly did not expect to encounter such a situation. They looked warily at Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting in the main hall. They thought that the Central Plains people were plotting something, but when they saw that the Su family and the Prince Ding mansion's trusted aides had all collapsed, they couldn't help but feel even more confused. Mo Xiaoyao sat in a wide chair, one hand supporting Yi Li, who was leaning on him. He said calmly, "I also want to know what's going on. Mo Jingli, are you still not coming out?" "Ha ha ha. Mo Xiaoyao, you've finally fallen into my hands." At the entrance of the main hall, a man wearing a bright yellow dragon robe walked in. He looked at the guests who had collapsed in a mess with a smug expression. Mo Jingli waved his hand, and many men wearing black clothes and holding swords rushed in, surrounding the main hall. Mo Jingli walked to the center of the main hall proudly and looked up at Mo Xiaoyao. His Ming Emperor's dragon robe shone brightly under the candlelight. Other than his pale face, Mo Jingli really did have the aura of an emperor. Mo Xiaoyao, you didn't expect this, did you? The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. In the end, the winner is still me. Mo Xiaoyao looked calmly at his smug face and said calmly, "I don't see what you have to be so proud of." Mo Jingli laughed coldly. Mo Xiaoyao, you don't need to put on an act to scare me. Can you still move? My agarwood intoxication will poison the stronger the person. If you could still move, would you still be sitting there talking to me? Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and smiled. If that's the case, why don't you come up and try? Mo Jingli's eyes narrowed. He stared warily at Mo Xiaoyao for a while, then laughed and said, "You're right, I don't dare to come up."
So you don't need to provoke me.
"I don't even need to come up to kill you." Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "So, the so-called Emperor Chu is a piece of trash that even a person who has lost all of his internal energy is afraid of? No wonder the Chu State's Empress Dowager and her subjects wanted to depose you. If it was I would have crippled you 800 years ago. Compared to Mo Jingqi, you're still lacking." Mo Jingli's eyes flashed with anger. If the person he hated the most in his life was Mo Xiaoyao, then what he hated the most was people saying that he was inferior to Mo Jingqi. He could admit that he was inferior to Mo Xiaoyao, but he never thought that he was inferior to Mo Jingqi. What? It's a pity that he's dead, and soon you'll be dead too. 100 years later, the people of the world will not think that I am inferior to you. They will only know that I defeated Mo Jingqi and you, Mo Xiaoyao. I am the true #1 person in the world. Speaking of pride, Mo Jingli did not forget to look at Yili beside Mo Xiaoyao. He smiled and said, "Yili, don't you think so?" Yili calmly looked at him and lightly said, "If you think so, then so be it." It was just a simple sentence, but it caused Mo Jingli's expression to change 3 times in an instant. This was because Yili's words and tone were like she was telling a madman that everything he said was right. "Yili, come down. I can spare your life. Don't try any tricks, your internal strength is not strong. Even if you use a bit of strength, it's not like you can't move." Mo Jingli stared at Yili and said in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao held Yili's waist and looked at Mo Jingli with a cold light in his eyes. "You don't need to worry about Yili's life. If you have the time, you should worry about yourself. Or did I not teach you enough lessons?" Mo Jingli was stunned. He seemed to have thought of something, and his expression became strange. After a while, he finally began to laugh. He pointed at Mo Xiaoyao and said in a fierce voice, "Mo Xiaoyao, you're still so arrogant. Even now, you can't save your own life, so how can you save Yili? I will definitely make you die an ugly death today. Yili, come here. I can let bygones be bygones." Yili raised her eyes and looked at him as she calmly said, "How is it that this consort doesn't know of anything that requires this distinguished one to let bygones be bygones?" A trace of ruthlessness flashed through Mo Jingli's eyes. "Do you think that Mo Xiaoyao can still protect you right now?" Yili smiled without saying anything. She calmly leaned against Mo Xiaoyao's shoulder and ignored Mo Jingli. Mo Xiaoyao held Yili's waist with one hand and played with the wine cup in his hand with the other. He looked at Mo Jingli and said, "I am very curious. How did you poison her?" In the Prince Ding mansion, it was definitely not easy to poison someone. Otherwise, the people in the Prince Ding mansion would have been poisoned hundreds of times already. In the wine? That's not right. Even the people who didn't drink were poisoned. It's in the candle. Mo Jingli's eyes flashed, and he smiled. Prince Ding is truly quick-witted. This colorless and tasteless agarwood was not wasted after all. It's a pity that Prince Ding doesn't know about it now. Don't you think that it's too late? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, "Even so, it's impossible for your people to do it. Who else can step forward now? Let I see what kind of people would dare to do such a thing behind I's back." The hall was completely silent. No one stood up. This scene made Mo Jingli feel like he had lost all face. These people had helped him in secret, but now that Mo Xiaoyao was about to die, these people still didn't dare to step forward and openly stand behind him. Mo Jingli didn't know that in these people's eyes, unless they saw Prince Ding's head being separated from his body, they wouldn't have the courage to stand out and openly betray the Prince Ding mansion. Mo Xiaoyao has already been poisoned. What are you afraid of? Mo Jingli said coldly, looking at the people present with a threatening gaze. Not long after, one person stood up, then another. In a short while there were more than 10 people who stood up. Among them, there were the heads of famous families who couldn't be placed in important positions, as well as officials. There was also a former general of the Chu state who had surrendered to the Mahist army. It was clear that these people were pretending to be poisoned. Mo Xiaoyao's gaze swept over these people indifferently, finally landing on Mo Jingyu, who is still lying on the side. He said indifferently, "King Yu, you should also get up." Mo Jingyu was startled. Finally, he sighed slightly and stood up. Mo Jingli looked at him proudly and said with a smile, "Mo Xiaoyao, do you see? Do you think that everyone will be loyal to you and that everyone will be afraid of you? Aren't there still so many people who have betrayed you?" Mo Xiaoyao said with a calm expression, "Betrayal? I never planned to use them. What kind of betrayal is that? A bunch of trash. If you like them, then take them. Otherwise, you can ask them if they know any secrets about the Prince Ding mansion, or if they know any information about the Mahist army. Or, even if I were to die now, do they have a way to send you out of Glass City alive?" Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's words, the faces of the people who stood up became even more unsightly. Mo Jingli's expression changed. He sneered, "Since I dared to enter the Prince Ding mansion, I didn't plan on leaving alive. But to be able to drag you, Mo Xiaoyao, and so many people here down with me, my death is worth it." Chapter 1090. "Then congratulations," Mo Xiaoyao said without much sincerity. Mo Jingli stared irritably at Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting on the throne. A sense of helplessness rose in his heart. It had been like this since he was young. It was as if he could never gain the upper hand in front of Mo Xiaoyao. No matter how bad Mo Xiaoyao's situation was, in this dangerous situation, it was as if the one who always lost was him. If he had Ling Taihan's or even Mu Qingsong's strength, he could take this opportunity to rush up and stab Mo Xiaoyao. But even in this situation, he still didn't dare to get close to Mo Xiaoyao. He was afraid of Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Jingli couldn't help but admit this in his heart. This was a fact that he had always been ashamed to admit. Kill him for Zhen's. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao's calm appearance, Mo Jingli suddenly lost his patience and became more and more annoyed. A black-clothed man stepped forward and cautiously walked up the throne room. But when he saw that Mo Xiaoyao didn't react, he became more confident that Mo Xiaoyao was poisoned. He gathered his courage and took a few steps forward. The man was so agitated that the corners of his eyes twitched a few times. No one would be able to remain calm if they wanted to kill Prince Ding with their own hands. He finally drew his sword and slashed towards Mo Xiaoyao. No one saw Mo Xiaoyao make a move, but they heard the black-clothed man scream. He was thrown down from the throne room and fell to the ground, spitting out blood. It was clear that he had been thrown down by someone with extremely high internal strength. Everyone present let out a sigh of relief. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao was fine, they didn't know if they should feel lucky or regretful. Mo Jingli's expression turned even uglier. "You're not poisoned?" Mo Xiaoyao ignored Mo Jingli's question and said indifferently, "You can't kill I. Now, what do you want to do?" Mo Jingli's face was extremely ugly. After a while, he sneered, "So what if I can't kill you? We don't believe that they aren't poisoned like you. Kill them all." The men in black who came with Mo Jingli were all fugitives who knew that they were going to die. When they heard Mo Jingli's order, they didn't care who the guests were and directly drew their swords to attack. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Countless arrows pierced through the air. At the same time, the guests all stood up. Those who knew martial arts stood up to fight back, while those who did not know martial arts dodged. In just a few moments, the men in black that Mo Jingli had brought with him all fell to the ground. He was not subdued by the guests present. Instead, he fell to the ground like the previous guests. What's going on?" Mo Jingli said angrily. Although he wasn't completely poisoned, the people around him, including Mo Jingyu, weren't spared. "You have the nerve to use such a small trick like the agarwood intoxication." Shen Yang's voice came from a corner of the hall. The agarwood intoxication is indeed a very good knockout drug. It's colorless and tasteless. It can be mixed in water and can be burned. It's a pity that the antidote is easy to find. And the most common antidote is the ice jade orchid. But if one takes the antidote made from the agarwood fruit and smells the ice jade orchid, it will become another type of poison. Everyone then realized that the flowers used to decorate the hall were all orchids, and more than half of them were ice jade orchids. Only, the ice jade orchid was a type of orchid with very small flowers. It was placed among many other expensive orchids, and if one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to see it. Mo Jingli's face turned black. He gritted his teeth and said, Shenyang. As expected, it's you who spoiled our plans again. Shenyang smiled and said, Princely is too kind. It's just a coincidence. Coincidence my ass. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? Mo Xiaoyao clearly knew of his plan long ago. He even knew clearly what kind of poison he was going to use. Prince Ding really has good methods. In order to capture us, he didn't hesitate to risk the lives of so many guests. Mo Jingli gritted his teeth and said, if he didn't care about anything when he first came in and just slashed randomly, even if Mo Xiaoyao had people secretly protecting him, he definitely wouldn't be able to protect every single one of them. As expected, when these words were said, the guests' faces turned ugly. They didn't care if Prince Ding wanted to capture Mo Jingli, but if he used their lives as bait, that was too much. Prince Ding, what do you mean by this? The envoy from the western regions knew Mo Xiaoyao the least, so he took the initiative to question him. Mo Xiaoyao smiled calmly and said, I've frightened everyone. It's just that the song and dance are boring, so I invited everyone to watch a good show. I guarantee that no one will be hurt. What guarantee does Prince Ding have? Someone asked sharply. Based on the fact that no one is hurt. Genom King of Gojoseon, Crown Prince Yalu, Queen of Nanzhao, Princess Helan, what do you think? Mo Xiaoyao asked with a smile. Lei Tingfeng sighed and said, I admit defeat. Prince Ding is brilliant. I concede defeat. Yalu Hong was even more direct. This humble prince admits defeat. I'll add another 1,000 horses to Prince Ding. Since the horses had already been given, there wasn't much of a difference between 10,000 and 11,000 horses. Yalu Hong admitted that he could afford to lose. Princess Anxi was worried about her child. She nodded slightly and said, I concede defeat as well. Princess Helan blinked and giggled. Everyone's eyes lit up and shone brightly. It's said that the people of the Central Plains are very smart. Prince Ding is the smartest among them. I concede defeat as well. Within 2 years, I'll charge you 20% less for the furs and herbs that my northern tribe sells to the Prince Ding mansion. Mo Xiaoyao nodded satisfactorily and said with a smile, Thank you. Since all of you are so generous, this prince will kindly accept it. Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Jingli couldn't help but roar. How could he not understand that he had been tricked by Mo Xiaoyao? He was even used as a bet with the northern tribes and Nanzhao of Xiling. Such humiliation almost made Mo Jingli lose his mind. Mo Jingyu, who had fallen to the ground, was pale and unfocused. It's over, Mo Xiaoyao said leisurely. Jingli, I told you more than 10 years ago that you shouldn't do things that require you to use your brain. That's not suitable for you. With your personality, if you have the upper hand, how can you make a clean move without humiliating I? If I were you, I wouldn't even enter this hall. I'd just shoot arrows from outside. Do you think I only have these bargaining chips? Mo Jingli sneered. Although he was extremely angry, Mo Jingli was no longer a teenager. He quickly controlled his anger. Mo Xiaoyao raised his brows and said, What else do you want to say? Oh, right, the Prince of Nanzhao is in your hands, right? Mo Jingli sneered but didn't say anything. Mo Xiaoyao didn't care. He said calmly, So what if he's in your hands? That child is in Glass City, right?
Whose house are you hiding in?
I don't believe you have many strongholds in Glass City. You who can tell I where Mo Jingli is hiding the Prince of Nanzhao. Mo Xiaoyao looked down at the people below him.
No one spoke for a while.
Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and said, No one is willing to say? I wonder if your family members are willing to say? Everyone's expression changed. Most of them were the heads or important figures of famous families. Their families were definitely not as simple as a normal family with a few dozen people. Hundreds of people were implicated. The calamity of extermination, everyone trembled. Chapter 1091. Mo Jingli smiled coldly and said, What do you think they know? Mo Xiaoyao leisurely leaned into the chair. As he played with Yi Li's slender hand, he said with a smile, Jingli, you've suffered at the hands of these people, but you still don't remember. Do you think that because you have something on them, they will be obedient to you? You think that when they work for you, they won't keep something for themselves? Mo Jingli's expression froze. He swept his gaze across the people on the ground. Many people uncomfortably avoided his gaze. Mo Jingli's heart sank. In the hall, Mo Xiaoyao clapped his hands and said, Now, who will tell I the whereabouts of the little prince of Nanzhao? The hall was silent for a moment. Finally, a person climbed up shakily. Prince, have mercy. This official will speak. Ah. Before he finished speaking, he was kicked out by Mo Jingli, who was standing to the side. The person who spoke was just a scholar who didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. Even though Mo Jingli wasn't a top expert, his martial arts weren't weak either. Kicking him was like playing around. He raised his leg and sent the person flying. He crashed into a nearby pillar and spat out a mouthful of blood. Mo Jingli smiled coldly and said, Idiot. You think that if you speak, Mo Xiaoyao will let you go. Mo Xiaoyao shrugged and showed a rare sincerity. I can let you die more comfortably. In other words, whether they spoke or not, they would die. It was just a matter of how they died. Therefore, the restless crowd fell silent again. Mo Xiaoyao wasn't in a hurry. He slowly stood and walked down the hall. His unhurried footsteps gave people an indescribable feeling of pressure. Even the aggressive Mo Jingli couldn't help but take 2 steps back. When he realized his actions, Mo Jingli's face turned green and purple. Official Zhao. Mo Xiaoyao walked in front of Zhao Zhifeng and said with a smile, Prince? Zhao Zhifeng's face was pale as he replied in a trembling voice. Where is the little prince of Nanzhao? Mo Xiaoyao asked. Zhao Zhifeng shook his head and said, This official doesn't know. Don't know? Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows unhappily and said, Then what do you know? Zhao Zhifeng's gaze. He didn't dare meet Mo's eyes. He begged, This official doesn't know anything. Princesses have mercy. This official was muddle-headed and won't dare again. Mo Xiaoyao looked at him with a lowered brow. He sighed and said coolly, Throw the entire Zhao family into prison. Choose a day to execute them. Finishing, Mo Xiaoyao didn't look at Zhao Zhifeng as though he had no interest in him. Everyone on the ground stilled. They clearly hadn't thought that Prince Ding's interrogation would be so clean and efficient. Or rather, Prince Ding didn't care about the result at all. No. Your Highness, this old official knows his mistake. Your Highness, please spare my life. Zhao Zhifeng cried. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao didn't even spare him a glance, he turned his gaze to Yi Li, who was sitting in the main hall. Your Highness, this old official was wrong. Wang Fei, please have mercy on this official and his family. They are all innocent. Wang Fei, please have mercy on them. Yi Li sighed slightly. She looked sideways at Master Qingyun and smiled faintly. Grandfather, this place is chaotic. Let 5th younger brother accompany you back to your room to rest. Master Qingyun was old and didn't want to see too much blood. But he knew that today's situation wouldn't end so easily. He sighed deeply and nodded. Qingyun, come with me. 5th young Master Su, who had been watching the show with wide eyes, looked at Yi Li with grievance. But he couldn't disobey his grandfather's orders. He could only help Master Qingyun out. When Master Qingyun's figure disappeared from the back of the hall, Yi Li turned her head to look at Zhao Zhifeng, who was still begging. She asked coolly, Official Zhao said that your family is innocent. Do you know how many people would have died if your plan had succeeded? When Official Zhao did this, did he think for a moment that these people were innocent? I'm afraid you were thinking more about the benefits you would receive if you succeeded, right? Zhao Zhifeng was speechless. Yi Li took out a thin piece of paper from her sleeve and smiled faintly. This Fei has something here. Official Zhao should take a look. Yi Li's bodyguard came forward to take the paper. Yi Li waved her hand and stood up. She walked down the hall steps and personally handed the paper to Zhao Zhifeng. Zhao Zhifeng couldn't help but tremble when he saw it. Yi Li only gave him a thin piece of paper, but he recognized that it was from a book he had hidden in a secret compartment in his study. And the things recorded in that book were things that he couldn't reveal to outsiders. Once the things in that book were made public, even if Prince Ding spared his life, he wouldn't be able to live.
I'll talk.
Young Shitsi, the young Shitsi, has been captured. He's hidden in one of my side courtyards outside the city. The young prince of Nanzhao, this official really doesn't know where he is. As soon as this was said, everyone was shocked. Although the young Shitsi of the Prince Ding mansion didn't appear all day, which had already caused many people to speculate, they didn't expect that he was really captured by Mo Jingli. Hearing Zhao Zhifeng's words, Mo Jingli didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed loudly. Zhao Zhifeng, do you think Mo Yuchen is still in your side courtyard? Do you really think Zhen will believe you so much? Zhao Zhifeng was silent. Mo Jingli was suspicious. It wasn't impossible for him to send someone to secretly take Mo Xiaobao away after he transferred him. How is it? Mo Xiaoyao, did you win this round or Zhen? Looking at Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li, Mo Jingli sneered. Mo Xiaoyao held Yi Li's hand and looked at Mo Jingli indifferently. Mo Jingli also knew that he couldn't take advantage of Mo Xiaoyao here today. He stared hatefully at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "Get out of here. Let Chen out. Otherwise, just wait to collect your son's corpse." Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "I had someone bring a message to you before. Now it seems that you didn't hear it?" Mo Jingli was stunned and finally remembered what Mo Xiaoyao meant. He sneered and said, "If Shen can't even live, why should Jin care about him?" Mo Xiaoyao frowned and finally nodded. "Fine. I said, the longer you live, the more painful it will be. Since you don't believe me, then go out. I promise that in the 15 minutes after you leave the Prince Ding mansion, no one will do anything to you." Mo Jingli stared at Mo Xiaoyao cautiously, clearly not believing his promise. Mo Xiaoyao didn't mind, and pulled Yi Li back to the main hall. "You're really not afraid that I'll kill your son?" Mo Jingli asked. He didn't believe that Mo Xiaoyao would let him go so easily. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said, "You can try. You think I don't dare?" Mo Jingli gritted his teeth and said. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was indifferent. "I said that you can try, whether or not he could kill him." Mo Jingli hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he abandoned his poisoned subordinates and rushed out. Mo Xiaoyao didn't care about his departure. With a wave of his hand, people immediately came to clean up the main hall and brought in fresh fruits, pastries, and wine. The men in black who came with Mo Jingli and the people who betrayed the Prince Ding mansion with Mo Jingli were naturally moved out as well. In less than 15 minutes, the main hall returned to its original state, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 1092. I was just joking with all of you. I've frightened all of you. I would like to punish myself with a cup of wine and apologize to all of you. In the main hall, Mo Xiaoyao raised his wine cup and smiled as he spoke to the people in the hall. The guests in the hall looked at the man in white with hair as white as snow, and only felt a cold wind blowing over their heads. They also stood up in confusion and drank a cup with Mo Xiaoyao. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao calmly chatting and laughing with everyone, even the princess consort sat beside him with a faint smile, as if she was completely unaffected by the news of the little heir's capture. This made everyone doubt the authenticity of the news of the little heir's capture. But if this was fake, why would Prince Ding let Mo Jingli go at this time? "Prince, what do you think Prince Ding wants to do?" The official behind Lei Tingfeng glanced at the little emperor Mo Suiyun, who was sitting alone, and asked in a low voice. Lei Tingfeng smiled faintly and said, "Cleaning up, establishing power, and at the same time playing around with Mo Jingli. It has nothing to do with us, don't pay attention to it." The West Hills' current situation did not require any more calculations and risks. What they needed was stability. As long as they could stabilize the current situation and protect the West Hills' vitality, nothing else mattered. Playing around with Mo Jingli? The official stuttered. Obviously, he could not accept Lei Tingfeng's conclusion. Creating such a commotion when the various countries came to congratulate them was a slap to the Prince Ding mansion's face. Would anyone really play around with such a thing? Lei Dingfeng sighed and said helplessly, "It's really because Emo Xiaoyao really treated this matter as a joke. That's why it's even scarier. To treat such an important occasion and matter as a joke, one was either muddle-headed and incompetent, or one did not care about the enemy at all." Emo Xiaoyao was obviously the latter. That official understood what Lei Dingfeng meant and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He looked respectfully at Emo Xiaoyao. Prince Ding is so sure that nothing will happen to him? Among the people who attended the banquet tonight, it was not a small matter if any of them were injured, not to mention that the young heir of the Prince Ding mansion was among them. Lei Dingfeng shook his head. He had never felt that he understood Emo Xiaoyao, and perhaps he would never understand him. In the hall, Su Qingchen glanced at Emo Xiaoyao and said indifferently, "Aren't you guys going to take a look?" Emo Xiaoyao laughed. "There's no need to rush. Let him jump around for a while." It was obvious that he was treating Lei Dingfeng as if he were walking a puppy. "Don't overdo it," Su Qingchen reminded him. Even though Emo Xiaobao was very smart and had people secretly protecting him, he was still a child. If Emo Jingli was driven into a corner and did something to hurt Xiaobao, the losses would outweigh the gains. Emo Xiaoyao helplessly pulled Yili up and smiled. "All right, we'll go take a look. We'll have to trouble Brother Qingchen here." Seeing Emo Xiaoyao stand up, the people who were still discussing paused. They heard Emo Xiaoyao say with a smile, "Everyone, I and Princess Consort still have matters to attend to, so we'll take our leave first. We'll have to trouble young Master Qingchen to accompany us. Everyone, please enjoy yourselves." Emo Xiaoyao spoke very politely and tactfully, but it did not prevent the people from understanding. "I was going to deal with Emo Jingli. If you don't want to die, then stay here obediently." Seeing Prince Ding leaving leisurely with the princess consort, everyone turned their gaze towards young Master Qingchen. Young Master Qingchen smiled indifferently, looking handsome and otherworldly. "Everyone, please feel free. This one will first toast everyone."
Please.
"Young Master Qingchen, please." Glass City was also bustling with noise and excitement tonight. It was the first birthday of the two princes and princess of the Prince Ding mansion, and all the people were celebrating together. Although it was already late, the important streets of Glass City were still crowded with people, as if it was a festival. There were also many people who were praying for the princes and princesses in various ways. From this, one could see the Prince Ding mansion's status and reputation in the hearts of the people of the Northwest. Emo Jingli quickly shuttled through the dark alleys of Glass City. He had already taken off the dazzling dragon robe he was wearing, and he was only wearing a dark inner robe. If Emo Jingli was like a complacent emperor at the banquet, the current Emo Jingli was like a disheveled stray dog. Emo Xiaoyao kept his promise and knew that no one would stop him from leaving the Prince Ding mansion. However, this did not make Emo Jingli feel at ease. He always felt that there were countless Mahist army, Shadow Guard, and Qilins secretly following him, ready to catch him off guard at any time. Fortunately, it was already May, and he was only wearing his inner robe, so he did not feel cold at all. Emo Jingli walked through the darkest alleys of Glass City, so he did not attract much attention. After walking through the alleys for more than an hour, Emo Jingli thought that he had shaken off the people following him at the Prince Ding mansion. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief and use his qinggong to head in another direction. In a secret room, two children who looked exactly the same sat on the side of a simple bed. In their hands, they were holding a baby who was sleeping soundly in swaddling clothes. Emo Xiaobao looked at the baby in Qin Lai's arms and couldn't help but reach out to poke his little face. "So ugly." Qin Lai said coolly, "You looked like this when you were little." Emo Xiaobao did not believe it. "That's impossible. Lin, and Xian were very pretty when they were little." Qin Lai said, "This only proves that the second prince and the little master are better looking than you." Emo Xiaobao snorted and proudly glanced at his little face, saying, "You don't need to be jealous of this prince's extraordinary handsomeness. Don't he look the same as this prince now?" Qinlai looked at the ceiling of the secret room and rolled his eyes. Mo Xiaobao looked outside and frowned, saying, Mo Jingli will be back soon. Let's take this little demon and leave quickly. A certain person's biggest mistake was not knowing that a crafty rabbit has 3 burrows and put all his chips in one place. Therefore, Mo Xiaobao brought people to follow Qinlai and coincidentally found the little prince of Nanzhao Kingdom who had been missing for several days. After leaving Princess Anqi, the little prince had suffered a lot. Mo Jingli naturally did not know how to take care of children, nor would he treat other people's children well. He just maintained a state where he would not starve to death. When Mo Xiaobao found him, Qinlai was busy coaxing the child. Reality proved that even though Qinlai had been trained to follow the Prince Ding mansion since he was young, he was far inferior to Mo Xiaobao when it came to coaxing children. At least Mo Xiaobao had 2 younger siblings to practice with. After successfully coaxing the little prince whose voice was hoarse from crying to sleep, Mo Xiaobao discussed with Qinlai how to retreat. Qinlai said coolly, This courtyard is filled with Mo Jingli's people. You being able to enter does not mean you can leave. Also, you have a child with you. A half-year-old baby did not know anything. Once he woke up, he would definitely cry endlessly. Also, this child was too young and too weak. Qinlai did not dare to take the risk with him. Mo Xiaobao lowered his head in dejection. I made a bet with Royal Father that I could not use the Shadow Guard and Qilin. Qinlai resisted the urge to roll his eyes. You use such an important matter to bet? Mo Xiaobao pointed his finger guiltily. It's only because it's important that I bet. Royal Father would not lower himself to make a bet with him over a small matter. Chapter 1093. What are you betting? If I win, I don't need to be locked up. That was why young Master Mo spent so much effort to use himself as bait to find Mo Jingli's tracks and refused to mobilize the Shadow Guard behind him to help. Being locked up was too terrifying, too cruel, and too unreasonable. I knew it would be like this. What do you want to do now? May I ask what makes you think that the 2 of us can kill Mo Jingli? Qinlai asked coldly. Mo Xiaobao hesitated. Poison? Do you have it? Qinlai asked. I have a poison that makes people have diarrhea. Mo Xiaobao said. Mr. Chen wasn't willing to give him a poison that could take people's lives. Qinlai nodded seriously and said, You can pray that he dies from diarrhea. Mo Xiaobao could only roll his eyes. By the time Mo Jingli died from diarrhea, it would be too late. Mo Xiaobao's eyes turned, and he said with a smile, I got it, I'll tell you. Moving close to Qinlai's ear, Mo Xiaobao whispered. Hearing his words, Qinlai's eyes twitched and he asked, Is it okay? Definitely no problem. Just wait for the show. Mo Xiaobao said with a smile. Qinlai was silent for a moment before saying sincerely, There will be retribution for being too wicked. Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes at him. Don't say it like you aren't interested. Qinlai was silent. The 2 of them looked at each other and revealed a meaningful smile at the same time. Mo Xiaobao happily pounced on Qinlai, using all his strength to ravage that exquisite face that was exactly the same as his own. Good brother, I knew that you would also find it fun. That was why it was said that those who were able to mingle in Ding Prince Fu and still be able to mingle well were all not good people. Just as Mo Xiaobao finished discussing with Qinlai, a flurry of footsteps came from outside. Even though there were many guards in the yard, they were usually very careful when moving. If Mo Xiaobao and Qinlai didn't pay attention to the movements outside, they wouldn't be able to hear any footsteps. The only person who could leave so arrogantly was probably Mo Jingli. Mo Xiaobao glanced at Qinlai and quickly jumped onto the roof beam, disappearing into an inconspicuous hole above the beam. Just as Xiaobao disappeared, the door to the room was kicked open from the outside. The child, who had been sleeping on the bed, was startled by the loud noise. He pursed his lips and began to cry loudly again. Qinlai felt cold sweat drip down his back as he watched the child cry his heart out. He really didn't know how to coax children. Just now, this little ancestor was coaxed to sleep by Xiaobao. Shut up. Mo Jingli's entire body was filled with a low pressure as he roared coldly. Qinlai rolled his eyes. If you have the ability, come and coax her. Are you crazy? Don't you know that children are hard to coax? Mo Jingli had just suffered a great loss at the hands of Mo Xiaoyao. Now that he was being mocked by Qin Lai, his expression became even uglier. Mo Jingli charged forward and grabbed Qin Lai. His expression was cold as he said, "Do you want to die?" Qin Lai unceremoniously raised his hand and stabbed towards Mo Jingli's eyes. Mo Jingli quickly raised his other hand to block. Qin Lai flipped in the air and kicked away Mo Jingli's hand. He retreated a few steps and stood firmly. He raised his chin and stared at Mo Jingli provocatively. Qin Lai's beautiful counterattack caused Mo Jingli's expression to become even uglier. Even though he wasn't worried that this brat would rebel, but Mo Xiaoyao's son was already so strong at such a young age, and his only son was. Qin Lai snorted and said, "Do you dare to kill me? If you kill this prince, then you can just wait to die." Mo Jingli's expression was ferocious. "Even if I die, it's not bad to have you accompany me in death. I want to see if Mo Xiaoyao and Yili will feel heartache after losing a son." Qin Lai clapped his hands and laughed. "Ioyo, Emperor Chu is really ambitious. So your dream is to see my royal father and mother feel heartache. So what? Even if you kill me, this world will still belong to my royal father. I still have my younger brother and sister. My royal father and mother will still live peacefully in the future. This prince feels that having Emperor Chu accompany me in death is not bad. Who knows, if my royal father gets angry, he can even send a few more people to accompany me in death. For example, Mo Suyan, and maybe even Mo Suiyun. Exchanging 3 generations of Emperor Chu for this prince is still worth it. You really aren't afraid of deaths." Mo Jingli stared at Qin Lai and asked. Qin Lai smiled and said, "I should be a little better than Emperor Chu. Emperor Chu, you can try and see if you can still walk out of Glass City after killing this prince. Oh, there's also the Southern Zhao prince. Maybe you can use him as a bargaining chip." Mo Jingli's expression was still ugly, but the killing intent on his body was gradually retracting. He was very clear in his heart that the Southern Zhao prince could only be used as a bargaining chip when it wasn't important. If he really killed Mo Xiaoyao, a Southern Zhao prince definitely wouldn't be able to offset Mo Xiaoyao's anger. With a cold snort, Mo Jingli finally left in a huff. "You stay with me obediently. I can't kill you right now, but that doesn't mean I can't cripple you." "This prince is so scared," Qin Lai said without much sincerity. He didn't pay attention to the angry Mo Jingli, who left in a hurry. He walked to the bedside and clumsily coaxed the sobbing baby. In the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili weren't in a hurry to find Mo Xiaobao. The matter this time was originally a trial for Mo Jingli. Otherwise, if they wanted to kill Mo Jingli, it wouldn't have needed to be so complicated. It would have been done long ago. In a dark prison cell in the prince's mansion, Mo Xiaoyao sat silently on a large chair. He looked at Mo Xiaoyao and Yili, who sat opposite him, and his heart was slightly uneasy. After a while, he couldn't help but ask, "Are you really not worried about the little prince's safety?" Mo Xiaoyao glanced at him before lowering his head to continue reading the file in his hands. He calmly said, "If he was so easily injured by Mo Jingli, he doesn't deserve to be the heir of Prince Ding." Mo Jingyu frowned. He had personally seen Mo Xiaobao being drugged and then taken away by Mo Jingli. However, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili's calmness made him feel that something was wrong. There weren't any parents in the world who wouldn't worry about their children's safety unless they were certain that their children weren't in danger. "The prince is really in Mo Jingli's hands," Mo Jingyu said. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. "I know this. Otherwise, why do you think I let Mo Jingli leave? I don't have any interest in this right now." Mo Jingyu, tell I the locations of all the Chu state and Mo Jingli's strongholds in Glass City. Mo Jingyu was startled. In a low voice, he said, "This matter has nothing to do with the Chu state. Cooperating with Mo Jingli is I's own matter." Mo Xiaoyao raised his brows and smiled. "You don't need to explain this to I. I want you to know the locations of all the Chu State's royal family and Mo Jingli's strongholds, as well as the names of their spies. How many spies and secret forces were hidden in the Chu State's royal family? Even the Prince Ding mansion didn't know everything. If it weren't for these forces, Mo Jingli wouldn't have been able to cause so much trouble in Glass City. Chapter 1094. I am only a prince of the imperial family. Only Mo Jingli himself knows these things, Mo Jingli said. Mo Xiuyao shook his head, not believing his words at all. He smiled. But I feel that there are many things that even Mo Jingli doesn't know about. The one who truly knows should be the Empress Dowager. And this time, it's impossible for the Empress Dowager to not tell you at all about your visit to Glass City. Mo Jingyu was startled, lowering his eyes in silence. Mo Xiuyao leisurely leaned against the couch, calmly saying, when Mo Jingli was still alive, he had planted many spies in the northwest. Naturally, Mo Jingli wouldn't know about these things. But the Empress Dowager definitely knows. Originally, I didn't plan to pay attention to it. After all, there are no walls in this world that don't have cracks. Even if I get rid of these spies, there will always be people who will sharpen their heads and dig in. But this time, Mo Jingli's incident taught a very important lesson. Being soft-hearted will only bring about big trouble. So, I decided to clean up those bugs, spray them with insecticide water, and set them on fire. Perhaps they won't grow in the future. Mo Jingyu's lips couldn't help but twitch. You call this being soft-hearted? Everyone in the world is a living Buddha. From the start, did you want to dig out the Chu State spies in the northwest, or did you want to capture Mo Jingli? After a long time, Mo Jingyu finally asked. Mo Xiuyao rubbed his chin, calmly asking, why can't I think of both? That old witch from the Chu State sure has guts. Using this to negotiate with the Mahist army can't attack Jiangnan for 20 years? How did she come up with such a cute condition? Mo Jingyu finally understood that all these unlucky matters originated from the Empress Dowager's own decision. He didn't know that the Empress Dowager had proposed such a condition to Mo Xiuyao. It was obvious that the Empress Dowager was still on guard against him. Sighing, Mo Jingyu said, I don't know about this. The Empress Dowager didn't even tell me about this. Do you think I would know about the list of the Chu State spies in the northwest? Mo Xiuyao sneered, if you didn't know, would you dare to make this trip? Mo Jingyu fell silent again. After a long time, he raised his head and asked, what benefits will I get if I tell you? Mo Xiuyao looked at him with a radiant smile. You don't have to be tortured. Mo Jingyu shook his head. No, you have to guarantee my safety. Although I agreed to help Mo Jingli, I didn't actually do anything. So, it shouldn't be considered as offending the Prince Ding mansion, right? I can tell you where the little heir is, but you have to guarantee my safety and let me leave the northwest. Mo Xiuyao looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. You didn't do anything? Forcing the Chu State's little emperor to trick Mo Xiaobao out, does that count as doing something? Mo Jingyu's eyes widened. How did you? Mo Xiuyao waved his hand, and the door to the nearby prison opened. 11 or 12-year-old youth wearing a bright yellow dragon robe walked in. Looking at Mo Jingyu, he softly called, Uncle Yu. Mo Jingyu stared at Mo Xiuyao in disbelief. It was you who told Mo Xiuyao. Just by looking at Mo Suiyun's appearance, he knew that he didn't suffer much. In other words, the people from the Prince Ding mansion didn't force him. He even saw a hint of joy and schadenfreude in Mo Suiyun's eyes. Mo Jingyu couldn't help but think that perhaps he had always underestimated this unremarkable little emperor. Mo Suiyun blinked, looking at Mo Jingyu with some grievance. Uncle Yu, I'm very sorry. I don't want to die, and I don't want to die with you. I'm very scared of Uncle Prince Ding. Haven't you always told me that Uncle Prince Ding is very powerful? Then why did you still want me to capture his son?
I'll die.
Mo Jingyu was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. How could he not see that this kid was simply pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? Mo Jingyu gritted his teeth. Mo Suiyun, do you know what you're doing? Mo Suiyun hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. Emo Xiaoyao lazily said, "This child knows what he's doing better than you. How do you think I knew what you were going to do tonight? How did Xinyang not know about the ice magnolia in the main hall? It was you." Although he knew that he had been betrayed by Emo Suiyun, Emo Jingyu still didn't dare to believe that Emo Suiyun had started to collude with the Prince Ding mansion so early. "You cooperating with the Prince Ding mansion. Aren't you afraid of asking a tiger for its skin?" Emo Suiyun looked up at Emo Jingyu, saying seriously, "Uncle Yu, if I didn't cooperate with the Prince Ding mansion, I might have already died. If I cooperate with Uncle Prince Ding, I'll still have a chance to live. Only by living can I have a chance to turn the tables." After taking a deep look at Emo Suiyun, Emo Jingyu finally fell back into his chair powerlessly, looking as though he had nothing to say. Emo Xiaoyao waved his hand, signaling for someone to bring Emo Suiyun back. The prison cell quieted down again. Emo Xiaoyao looked at Emo Xiaoyao and Yi Li, saying with a bitter smile, "Prince Ding is indeed a good schemer. He can play everyone in the world in the palm of his hand." Emo Xiaoyao slightly raised his eyebrows, not saying anything. Emo Jingyu looked at him and said, "From the start, you knew that Emo Jingli wanted to make a move on Prince Ding. And you knew what he wanted to do. Then, Prince Ding being captured so easily by Emo Jingli was probably part of his plan, right?" After suddenly realizing that everything was in the palm of someone else's hand, Emo Jingyu became clear-headed instead. He suddenly recalled that when Emo Xiaoyao's corpse came back to life, Emo Jingli and Lei Jinting did not see any clues. His heart sank, and he said, the one captured by Emo Jingli was not the prince at all. No parents would be able to remain so calm and collected when their son was taken away, even if there were countless people secretly protecting him. Emo Xiaoyao sighed softly, looking at Emo Jingyu with some regret. "Emo Jingyu, you've always been a smart person. It's a pity you did a foolish thing in Ai's territory. I really had no choice but to take action against you. What benefits did Emo Jingli give you to dare to go against Ai?" Emo Jingyu's face was pale. He closed his eyes and said in a low voice, "The Imperial Jade Seal." "The Imperial Jade Seal?" Emo Xiaoyao raised his brows with interest. He turned to look at Yi Li and asked, "Li, do you like the Imperial Jade Seal?" Yi Li looked at him with a smile. "The Imperial Jade Seal? What use does it have?" "It doesn't seem to have any use." Emo Xiaoyao was silent for a moment. "It's just a bit bigger than the Prince Ding Mansion seal." Yi Li shook her head. "If you think it's too small, you can carve the 9 Dragons seal onto the Prince Ding Mansion's handwriting." Emo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement. He had no interest in the Imperial Jade Seal, and the one in Emo Jingli's hand could not be called the Imperial Jade Seal. At most, it could only be considered the De Chu State's Imperial Jade Seal. If he was interested, he could directly establish a country and take the throne. He could find any piece of jade and carve an Imperial Jade Seal for generations to come. Emo Xiaoyao's smile was somewhat bitter. Not everyone had Emo Xiaoyao's ability and boldness. For someone who had ambitions for the throne, the Imperial Jade Seal was definitely an irresistible temptation. Moreover, Emo Jingli's conditions were far more than just the Imperial Jade Seal. He had no choice but to agree. Chapter 1095. Emo Xiaoyao looked at him and calmly said, "A mere Imperial Jade Seal shouldn't give you the courage to go against Ai. Is there anything else?" Emo Xiaoyao did not speak. It was not that he still wanted to deny it to Emo Xiaoyao, but he really could not say it. If he said it, he would only die. Seeing his stubborn appearance, Emo Xiaoyao coldly laughed and said, "You think that if you don't say it, I won't be able to find out?" Emo Jingyu's face paled. He finally lowered his head and said hoarsely, "Prince, since you already know, why ask?" Emo Xiaoyao stared at him and said, "I just don't understand, as a member of the imperial family of the De Chu state, why would you sell your country for a mere few 100,000 taels of silver? In those 2 years, at least half of the people who were massacred in the north should be counted on your head, right?" Emo Jingyu's face was deathly pale. His lips trembled slightly. He closed his eyes for a long time before sighing and saying, "For what? I also don't know why. Perhaps it was to fight for some dignity. Clearly, they are all father's sons." Mo Jingqi and Mo Jingli, that idiot, ruined the Dechu state, but they still took turns to hold the power. Even if Mo Jingqi was killed by Mo Jingli, compared to letting outsiders like us hold the power, the Empress Dowager would still rather put her son under house arrest. They schemed against each other for the sake of power, while we, who worked hard for the Dechu state, had a noble status on the surface, but in reality, we couldn't even afford to buy a small toy. This kind of life, didn't Prince Ding also experience it? If not for the Prince Ding mansion's wealth, what kind of life would Prince Ding have had in those years? You think that you are smarter than Mo Jingqi and Mo Jingli? Mo Xiaoyao coldly laughed and asked. Mo Jingyu raised his hand to cover his eyes, saying sadly, "At first, I thought so.
Now,
I also don't know." He was not a deranged traitor. His moment of confusion back then had created an irreversible mistake. By the time he came to his senses, the Dechu state had already moved south. These years, he had assisted Mo Jingli with great care. Unfortunately, because of his imperial status, Mo Jingli had always been on guard against him. And now, someone finally came to settle this score? For a moment, Mo Jingyu appeared disheartened. He looked up at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "I'll tell you everything you want to know. How you want to punish me, up to you. Only my children are still in Dechu state. I hope that the Prince Ding mansion can guarantee their safety. I don't ask for glory and wealth. I only ask for their safety." After saying these words, Mo Jingyu seemed to have aged several years. Mo Xiaoyao was silent for a moment, then nodded in agreement. Mo Jingyu understood Mo Xiaoyao. Although he was crafty and cunning, making his enemies gnash their teeth in hatred. But when he made a promise, he always kept it. Mo Jingyu nodded and said, "Bring me a pen and paper. I can only tell you what I know, but the Empress Dowager may not tell me everything." After a moment, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili left the prison cell with the information Mo Jingyu provided. In the prison cell, Mo Jingyu was still sitting on the large chair. His entire body was motionless, as though he had lost all signs of life. Mo Jingyu's fate had long been decided. Regardless of whether it was Mo Xiaoyao or the Prince Ding mansion, traitors who betrayed the country were severely punished. Whether he confessed or not, only death awaited him. But now no one cared whether he lived or died. This night seemed to be extremely long. In a place where the citizens who were immersed in joy did not know, a bloody storm was secretly brewing. The hidden forces that Mo Jingli had been secretly proud of and relied on were removed one by one. The next day, many people would discover that the people who had been living by their side had suddenly disappeared without a trace. From then on, they would never be able to find any traces of them. At this time, Mo Xiaobao naturally did not know that while he was racking his brains on how to play with Mo Jingli, his father had already finished many things. At this time, Mo Xiaobao was lying on the roof with a smile, peeking down through the cracks in the roof. Daring to climb onto the roof of a person whose martial arts were not low in this heavily guarded place, it was enough to show that Mo Xiaobao had quite a bit of confidence in his qigong. The shadow guards who were secretly protecting him were willing to let him climb onto Mo Jingli's roof, proving that they were quite confident in their prince's ability. At this time, Mo Xiaobao had a sinister smile on his face as he stared at the furious man below. Everything in the room had been smashed clean. He originally wanted to viciously slap Mo Xiaoyao's face and even take his life, but in the end, it did not go as he wished. Instead, he became a joke. How could Mo Jingli not be angry? After venting his anger, Mo Jingli finally calmed down a little and said in a deep voice, "Bring wine." Not long later, someone came in with wine and placed it on the table. Mo Jingli looked at the guard who brought the wine in with annoyance and said in a deep voice, "Get out." Ever since he was injured by Mo Xiaoyao and Liang, Mo Jingli did not like to interact with others. Other than when it was necessary, he usually brought himself alone. This naturally made the people around him feel strange. After all, although Mo Jingli was not considered a pervert in the past, the number of women by his side was not small. However, they had been on the run all this time, so Mo Jingli's lack of interest in women did not attract too much attention. Mo Jingli sat at the table and poured a cup of wine into his mouth. The burning sensation of the strong wine made his eyes a little bloodshot. Tonight's huge defeat and the faint fear in his heart made him unable to resist pouring cup after cup of wine into his mouth. On the roof, Emo Xiaobao smelled the pungent smell of wine and wrinkled his nose. He smiled and took out an extremely small pill, crushed it into powder, and threw it in through the cracks of the roof. The light powder casually floated, some landing in the wine cup, some landing on Emo Jingli's body. Emo Xiaobao frowned in disappointment and helplessly sighed. If he directly threw the pill into Emo Jingli's wine, it would definitely be discovered by Emo Jingli. Although it would not be easily discovered if he crushed it into powder, he was afraid that the medicinal effect would not be enough. In fact, if it was not for Emo Jingli's irritation that made him pour down the wine, he was afraid that the powder he scattered would be discovered by others. Reality was like this. Emo Xiaobao could only helplessly accept it. He looked at Emo Jingli below and quietly left the roof. Not long later, the originally quiet courtyard suddenly became lively. For some reason, a fire suddenly appeared in the backyard. Originally, a fire was not a big deal, but at this very sensitive time, any abnormality could attract the shadow guards of the Prince Ding mansion. The entire courtyard became a mess. Other than the guards at the door, everyone else was busy putting out the fire and looking for traces. Emo Jingli, who had been drinking, suddenly heard the noise and became even more displeased. He abruptly opened the door and walked out, shouting sternly, "What's going on?" A guard hurriedly came forward to reporting to Your Highness, the backyard suddenly caught on fire. Chapter 1096. Fire in the Backyard. Emo Jingli frowned and quickly reacted. He rushed to Qin Lai's room. He kicked the door open. Sure enough, it was empty inside. There was no trace of Qin Lai. Idiot. Go and find him. Emo Jingli turned back and slapped the guard behind him, roaring. This was Glass City, the Prince Ding mansion. As long as they got out of this small courtyard, it was as difficult as ascending to the sky for them to catch Emo Yuchen again. After thinking about it, Emo Jingli decided to leave this place as soon as possible. Outside the small courtyard, Emo Xiaobao and Qin Lai handed the sleeping little prince of Nanzhao to Lung Junhan and Su Zhiwei, who had been waiting outside. They ordered them to send the little guy back to the Prince Ding mansion. Su Zhiwei grabbed Emo Xiaobao, who was about to escape, and asked, "Where are you going?" Emo Xiaobao smiled and said, "Watch the show. There's nothing for us to do." He lit a fire and informed the shadow guard of the Prince Ding mansion of Emo Jingli's exact location. Then the task was completed. His royal father couldn't possibly expect a 10-year-old child to destroy Emo Jingli, could he? Since there's nothing else, let's go back to the Prince Ding mansion together. Su Zhiwei said seriously. How could that be? Emo Xiaobao was shocked. Before Su Zhiwei reacted, he had jumped a few feet away. He smiled and said to Su Zhiwei, "Cousin Zhiwei, I still have something to do. You and little dummy Lung send this kid back to Aunt Anshi. This is an order." After that, Emo Xiaobao didn't wait for Su Zhiwei's answer. He directly jumped over the wall and disappeared in the alley again. Qin Lai held a little face that was exactly the same as Emo Xiaobao's. He patted Su Zhiwei and said, "Don't worry, I'll look after him." After that, he also jumped over the wall. The fair and tender Lung Xiaodai was still fair and tender in a black night suit. She glanced at the gloomy Su Zhiwei carefully and asked in a low voice, "What should we do?" Su Zhiwei glanced at the baby in Lung Junhan's hand worriedly and said in a low voice, "Guards." A man in black appeared behind Su Zhiwei. "Young master." Su Zhiwei waved his hand and said, "Send Junhan and the little prince of Nanzhao back to the Prince Ding mansion." After saying that, he also jumped over the wall. Although he came from a scholarly family, Su Zhiwei's Qinggong was still very impressive. In the alley, only the shadow guard and Lung Junhan were left looking at each other. After a while, Lung Junhan put the child in the hands of the shadow guard and said, "Uncle." The shadow guard silently rolled his eyes. "I know. Send the little prince of Nanzhao back to the Prince Ding mansion." Lung Junon nodded with satisfaction and followed him to climb the wall. Soon, only the shadow guard was left in the dark alleyway, holding the baby in his arms as he silently stared at the empty wall. It was slightly bleak. In the darkness, two tall and handsome men stood on the roof, looking at the scene below with amusement. Han Mingxi pointed at the shadow guard holding the baby and laughed until he was convulsing. "Brother, our little heir, and these little rascals are very interesting." Beside him, young Master Ming Yu was leaning against the roof. The faint moonlight shone on his handsome face, reflecting a faint smile. He looked at Han Mingxi and said, "The heir's qinggong is very good. You must have put in a lot of effort." The smile on Han Mingxi's face instantly froze. He laughed dryly and looked at his elder brother. He didn't know how his elder brother could tell that the little heir's qinggong was taught by him. There was clearly no trace of him. Young Master Feng Yu's unique qinggong was indeed very good, but his reputation back then wasn't that good either. Although no one mentioned the name of young Master Feng Yu in these years, Han Mingxi still didn't want his reputation to affect Mo Xiaobao negatively. So when Mi Xiaobao came to ask for guidance on qinggong, Han Mingxi specially improved his own qinggong quite a bit. It was a pity that Han Mingxi didn't know that a few years later, a certain someone's reputation in the pugilistic world would only be worse than his. It would be a waste of young Master Feng Yu's efforts. Han Mingyue shook his head and smiled as he looked at the lonely shadow guard below. "You're right. These little rascals are quite interesting. They will definitely become the little heir's confidants and most trusted brothers in the future." The friendship between these children easily reminded him of the friendship he had with Mo Xiaoyao when he was young. Although they were already older than these children when they first met, their relationship was truly closer than that of real brothers. It was a pity Han Mingxi also knew that his elder brother was thinking of something. He went up and patted Han Mingyue's shoulder. "Elder brother, it's all in the past. Didn't Mo Xiaoyao no longer blame you?" Han Mingyue smiled and nodded. He stood up and said, "Let's go and take a look. They're still children after all. Don't let anything happen to them." Prince Ding said that there's no need to care about them if their lives aren't in danger. "I know. I also want to see how the little heir is going to torment Mo Jingli." Han Mingyue felt that Mo Jingli's smile was a little strange when he left. He secretly prayed for Mo Jingli in his heart. Glass City was neither big nor small. It might be easy to find a group of people, but it wasn't easy to find a single person, especially at night without alerting the commoners. Mo Jingli quickly sensed that there was something wrong with the fire in the small courtyard. In addition, with the disappearance of Mo Xiaobao and Nanzhao's little heir, he immediately understood that their residence had been exposed. He did not stay any longer. He only brought his two most trusted subordinates and left the small courtyard in the midst of the chaos. However, they soon discovered one thing. The Great Chu's spies in Glass City had all been uprooted in less than 2 hours. No matter if it was the Chu state's imperial family that originally existed, or Mo Jingli's men that were planted after the Mahist army became independent, or Mo Jingli's own men. They were all under the control of the Prince Ding mansion. Moreover, Mo Xiaoyao did not seem to care that Mo Jingli knew this news. Everywhere they went, they saw the Prince Ding mansion's soldiers eyeing them covetously. Thus, he had no choice but to flee once again. After busying himself for nearly 2 hours and running through the entire Glass City, he couldn't even find a place to stay. Instead, he was so tired that he was panting. It was already close to midnight. In the end, Mo Jingli was forced into a corner and decided to risk it all. He headed in the direction of the Prince Ding mansion. At this time, Mo Xiaobao, Qin Lai, and the others were also panting as they ran through Glass City. Little heir Mo flew into a rage when he accidentally lost track of Mo Jingli. "We're going to die anyway. Why are we running so fast? What do we do now? Where are we going to find him?" After playing for an entire night, the tired Lung Junhan was a little dispirited. "We're going to die anyway. Even if I'm Mo Jingli, I have to run faster." Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes and turned to look at Qin Lai. Qin Lai shrugged, indicating that he also did not know where Mo Jingli ran off to. Mo Xiaobao was a little aggrieved. If he could not mess with Mo Jingli, he would die a horrible death. Yo, little heir, why are you still outside so late? A laughing voice came from the top of the wall. The four looked up and saw Han Mingxi sitting leisurely on the wall, smiling at them. Mo Xiaobao's eyes lit up. Uncle Han, do you know where Mo Jingli ran off to? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.